This is the Wise Guy Radio Show, a podcast dedicated to educating and inspiring through conversations with today's top talents in the world of glass. We will be dissecting their journeys in hopes to deliver actionable content that you, the artist, can start implementing now, helping you grow not only as a creative spirit, but also a successful artistic entrepreneur. With a little organization, relationship building, and your artistic ability, you can obtain greatness. Climb aboard, whether an artist, retail owner, or enthusiast. We have a ton of fun in store for you. Welcome to the Wise Guy Radio Show.
You're listening to the Wise Guy Radio Show.
Glass Arts. For the month of August 2018, Mountain Glass is offering their Boro sale. Pyrex rod and tube at 45% off. That's one hell of a deal. No code needed. On sale all August. And for all you soft glass nerds, they have their Effetre rod at 35% off sale. All you need to do is use the code Effetre, that's E-F-F-E-T-R-E at checkout. And they also have a bunch of kiln sales and all kind of other fun things going on over there at Mountain Glass. So go check them out at mountainglass.com. That's mountainglass.com. Hey, what's happening? Welcome to episode number 199, part 1. Yep, that's right. We have a part 1 and part 2 for 199. This series of episodes features my brother, Jared. Goes by JB Glass, or also at Lurk the World on Instagram. Has a little side character and just concept thing that he's found and to be able to put his voice into. He's calling the Lurker. It's a super fun piece and character that he's doing. We have a fun background story that is what this entire first episode leads up to. Jared being only behind the torch now for 7 years, he's really excelled through taking classes and has busted his ass and has been trying to find this voice that we all look for in our work. And because of his cognitive recollection of the last 7 years, basically, we ended up having about 4.5 hour conversation, and which was kind of crazy because like I haven't talked on the phone with anybody for that long since I think it was like middle school when I had was on the phone with my girlfriend at the time and fell asleep talking to her, kind of thing. And Jared's now living out in Colorado, so it was a good time for him and I to catch up, but also to get a perspective on his journey that started by him coming with me to a studio that I was a part of, I guess 7 years ago-ish, maybe 8 years ago I got it started, but was offered a spot basically as a consultant to build a studio for a company. And the goal was to do a production studio, and I had my production background, and also through the Subway process, when I worked at Subway, which I've mentioned several times, I worked there for 7 years, and through that job, I had a management position, which I had employees, so it taught me the aspect of dealing with employees and stuff. So I had a lot of skills I was able to use, and we built the studio, and one thing led to another. The permits weren't pulled properly, and it took forever. So we all ended up walking away from this situation. And Jared talks about that and then where he's went from there. And it was fun to hear about it. And also it was fun for me to share my perspective on kind of where I've been in the last 7 years as well. Him and I were in this same little fork in the road, and then we went off on our own little journeys. And I went off to Disney, and he went off to follow his exploration of glass as a new hungry glassblower, and which has led him now to Colorado. So I think you'll enjoy this. I'm not going to talk too long on this intro just because of this episode. This particular one is 2.5 hours long, I believe. But again, I let him do a lot of talking. I just sat back and just enjoyed listening to a lot of it. And it was also late, so I was tired. But that being said, I really felt like I was in a position of just to sit here and listen and make a comment here and there when I need to. So Part 2 is going to start off, basically, I cut this one off at the end where Jared had his first show, where he revealed the character, the Lurker, to myself, but also to the world in a sense, in a show space, but also was teaching a class at the same time. It's a really crazy thing. And then I ended it there, and then part 2 is going to start off where he kind of backs up a bit and begins to talk about his actual point in his career where the lurker piece came to fruition in a sense, and as an idea and a concept that he then walked away from for a little bit and then kind of went back to it again, and eventually it became what it is now. So it's really cool to listen to his perspective, and I think he went along this process the right way for the most part. As we all grow and learn this medium, we make mistakes and get overzealous at times as well, and be sometimes too critical on ourselves, and it hints and stints our growth as artists. But I think you guys will enjoy this. It was a lot of fun, and it was also just fun the fact that's my brother. Him and I are pretty far apart in age, almost 15 years. So, well, I guess it is 15 years. Kind of 15 and a half years, we'll say. But anyways, so there you go. Yeah. So I think that's it. If I forget anything, I will put it in the intro for part 2. So there you go. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode with my brother Jared, or JB. You check him out on Instagrams at JB_glass. I believe that's what his own Instagram is. And also his secondary Instagram is Lurk of the World, LERK _ world. So until next time, thanks again for tuning in to episode 199, part 1. We'll talk to you soon. Love you so much. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you on the next episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show. Take it easy. See ya. What's going on, Jared? Welcome to the show.
Hey there, how you doing?
Good, man. Stoked to have you on here, dude. I know it's been a long time coming. We've had lots of talks about it, and I'm sure this is going to be a fun chat. Kind of give everybody here listening kind of my background as well as yours, and kind of how things came to be with yourself, which I'm excited to talk about, man. It's part of my glass history I haven't shared yet, so glad to have you on. It's going to be pretty badass.
Jason. Thank you, Jason. Thank you.
Yeah. Fuck yeah, dude. So before I start rambling like I do, man, if you want to get us started here by giving us your little superhero origin story and who introduced you to the flame.
Sure. I, before glass, I actually, I got into glass when I was 19, and freshly out of high school, I was working a retail position in the shopping mall down the street from my house. And one day I got the urge to move across the country. I moved to Kentucky and spent a few months out there. Didn't really like it, and decided to move back to Florida. Didn't really have a job. Didn't really have any sort of drive to do anything at that point. You gave me a call and actually told me about a job that was opening up at a distribution company you were working at, or it was like a warehouse facility at the time. And came over there, checked it out, saw what you were doing. At the time, I knew you had blown glass for never really 16 years at the time, but never really knew what you fully made or what was going on. And at the time, I didn't even really smoke or do anything in the industry at all. Checked out the shop, saw what was going on. Looked really fun, looked exciting, and I gave it a try. I remember it was like early August of 2011, and I think about it all the time. It was like August 6th through August 12th that week. I remember it being, and I remember coming in, getting on a Carlisle CC, brand new. It was like the shop there that was hosting the facility for all the workers. They had bought a bunch of equipment and a bunch of tools and stuff, and I was able to just hop on, and I had the opportunity to work for this production company with you as the manager for, that happened in August, and I worked through. I want to say April, but been asking myself that for the past couple of days, like how long I actually worked there.
Yeah,
But
it's kind of thinking that same thing.
yeah, there was a lot of ups and downs there. We worked in that studio, and at one point it got shut down. As always, it seems like with new shops, something happens. Someone comes in and says something. The shop got shut down for something, and we would have like a few weeks off, and then we'd be back in. And meanwhile, there was a production warehouse actually on site that was bringing in inventory as well. So we would go over there and do inventory on other items, smoke shop related. And then we would return to this facility and blow glass and get to have a few hours in the studio. And I remember at one point even we were working night shifts just to be able to work there.
To hide from the man.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. There was a couple guys in there. I don't know if anybody really continued blowing glass after that. I know some of the guys continued working with shops after that, but I worked there. I remember working there through my 20th birthday. I remember turning 20, asking for a torch for my birthday. My mom actually helped me out big time and actually got me a torch for my birthday. She got me the Red Max starter kit that Mountain Glass sells. And I worked on that for 2 or 3 debaters, just learning the basics of glass. And it was a step down from the Carlisle heat base wise, but it really gave me an appreciation for working the glass in a cold way, where you're not really just getting the material extremely soupy, extremely hot, and really you don't have any control over it. It gave me a sense of control early on, which I really liked the Red Max specifically for that, and I appreciated having that at that time for that. But
yeah, man. Yeah.
I worked through that warehouse space April of 2011. I guess it was April 2012 then. But started August 2011, worked through April of 2012. And then I actually showed up one day to Zen Glass Studios down in St. Petersburg, Florida. And at that time, the space was really dark. It was not dark in like a negative sense, but it was just a dark spot. Like I hadn't really been on that side of town. I had never really been in a space like that before. Not many guys were in there. There was a couple renters at the time. And they had just transitioned actually from another space. So they were in limbo. They had a bunch of stuff in and out of there. And I remember walking through and asking around people's names, not really seeing anybody, and winding up in this gift shop in the back where I saw some materials for sale and a couple guys back there sitting who I ended up learning, come to learn is the owners, Dave and Josh. And I hit it off with them. I told them that you were my brother. And of course they knew who you were. They knew that you had rented there in the past, and it was really welcoming. It was a real good vibe, and I really appreciate everything that they've ever done for me. It was a great opportunity to work there early on. That year 2012 was a real interesting year. It wasn't like the first year they were in that space, but it was the first year I feel like that space really kicked off in the sense of renters coming in there and really pushing it in that space. Previous to that, there was a group of guys, with you included, I remember, in the old space who were really pushing it. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like that transition to the new space, it took time to get, new renters in there and fresh ideas. And man, that year 2012 was an awesome year. Worked there through 2013, and I remember taking a couple times. There was a couple times in that summer between 2012, 2013, between the summer, winter, early on 2013, where I took off and I worked in a guest studio spot at a buddy space whose name's Zach Mondejar. He actually went by Calusa Glass at the time, but I worked in his space, and that was the first time, when I was working at Zen, all I had really seen at that time was frit work, and a lot of people were doing these stuff and puffs. But I remember this guy coming through the shop and showing me this line work and this pattern work. And I remember asking him, "Yo, hey, can I check you out? Can I see you work?" And him actually welcoming me into his space for a couple months and allowing me to work there. And at the time, I knew absolutely nothing. Like just watching this studio progress and for this one guy though really pushed me to have a sense of appreciation for myself and my own personal space, where I had been in a group setting up until that point. And he gave me a better appreciation for cleanliness and quality for yourself. And at that time, that's not something I really even understood. But I knew to make work, and I knew to keep working. And the styles he showed me, the wig wags, the line work. I remember him showing me how to make a bubbler for the first time. And man, everything he showed me really pushed me along. That time I came back to Zen. So this is still in that same 2012, 2013 mix of things. And I brought all that information back. I came in there pushing myself. I remember really, really trying to kind of mix myself into the crew that was there. And, they were receptive at first, that I was interested and excited, but they were obviously doing their own things. And as group studios go, everyone starts to kind of do their own things every once in a while. And at that point, I realized that I needed to continue on and doing my own thing. So I moved into a couple other spaces. Late 2013, I actually moved over to your house and started working in the backyard there. I remember we had like a 2-person setup. It was in a laundry room that had the washer and dryer ripped out, and there was like a hot water heater under the bench. And I remember we had one little vent fan up there, and just grinding on the Red Max. You had a kiln in the corner, I had a kiln in the corner, and we just did proto for a long time.
Yeah,
many months of proto. And that was right before you got the job at Disney. I remember all of that going on. The 2011 to 2014 Glasswise for me was a lot of exploration and growing up, in not only for myself, being that I was going from 19 to 23, 24, but in general, just growing up and understanding that, there's a lot of ups and downs and a lot of possibilities in the industry and a lot of ways you can go. And really, it's up to you to choose what you want to do. And working in those spaces, all those different spaces over that four-year period of time, gave me so many different views on how people run their business and run shit. And I feel like I gained years of information in such a short period of time. It was a lot of growing up that took place there.
Yeah, that's a lot of exposure, for sure.
Lots of exposure. Around 2013, I started taking some classes as well. I remember 2013, I was recognizing that things were going on. I was working at Zen. I was seeing other artists. Social media was just popping off really hard. I saw some artists from South Florida that were doing some really technical work. They were obviously taking classes. They were obviously going to these ASGS symposiums, and it was obvious to me that the only way that I could not only just see where I could be over the next few years really quick through working in these shops with these guys that have been doing it all this time, the best thing I could do was put myself in a position to learn from these people. So I needed to take these classes. I remember 2013, I believe it was, I took a class with Mataskookie and Huxtable, who Huxtable actually used to work at Disney as well. But it was a great class. I paid $250 for it, I believe. And it was at Tobacco Leaf up in Tallahassee, Florida. And those classes really opened up a lot for me. I had seen the wigwag. I had seen the downstem go in the bubbler. I had made all these spoons, tons of Fritz spoons, tons of just clear spoons. I was getting paid. I remember at that production job in 2011 when I started, I was getting paid 50 cents to make a 3-inch Chinese black spoon plus like $4 an hour or something. So it was up to me to grind. And that time between the start 2011 and the time I started taking classes, experiencing all the different shops and grinding through the proto, I really felt like that was the best thing that I could have done to gear myself up to now take on these classes. So I pushed myself into that deep end, going out, hanging out with a group of artists who I had never met, and just experiencing the world. I didn't really go to college. I took a semester of college. When I got out of high school, I kind of moved myself out into the middle of nowhere, and it was a good experience. It was just I feel like it was a good move socially for me to put myself into a class setting where, man, I still say it to this day. I've learned more in those classes at the after parties than I have just hanging out at my own studio with guys. Like, I'll hang out at a sesh afterwards, and so will be talking about how they took a class last week with someone, and they'll be talking about a technique, and that just blows my mind. That when I was first coming into it, I was definitely picking up on the idea that I was right there on the curve of studios being very private and exclusive, and studios being very open. And I saw 2012, 2013 start to roll around, and studios opening up more and more, these classes starting, the education rolling, and man, those classes did so much for me. I feel like I made some really good friendships in those classes that opened up doors as well for future studio space. 2014, I had taken a few classes at that point. I was really, I feel like as soon as I started taking classes, I started trying to pinpoint specific things. Not that I would pick up in the classes, but like this 6 months, I'm going to focus. I knew I was taking these classes. I knew I was going to show up to the next class. I knew I was going to make the work to trade the shop, to take the class. I knew I was going to make the work to sell to the work, production, whatever it took. I knew I was going to take that next class. So I almost put myself in a mental stance to focus chunks of time between 2013 and I would even say up until just even now, where I'm working now, my body of work now, I have taken focus for chunks of time to experiment with specific techniques and refinement within those techniques. So early on, 2013, I took that class with Huxtable Mataskoki. I had no idea what to expect, and I saw things go on that, I remember at one point he blew a big bubble and he tore a line perfectly around the bubble, and he made this glass spring, and that was something that I was like, what am I going to use that for? Like, where is that implementing in my work? But the idea that I saw what was possible with the medium early on, that was what I picked up in that class. But as I started taking more and more classes, I started recognizing, wow, there's certain things that I need to implement into my work that I'm not picking up, and there's certain things that I need to refine in my work as I pick them up. So I remember 2014, I focused a lot on learning color, learning how to prep color. I tried to put myself in a position where every class I went to, I was receiving information to then turn around and work on that specific thing in glass. So I remember at first it was all about the color for me, and then it became, I started taking these sculpting classes. I was taking I took a coil class, I took a Matt Robertson class, a Voorhees class, back to back to back, and sculpting really became obvious that was something I needed to add into my body of work and my mix. And it was very obvious at that time that I was making work that was only complementing where I was at in glass. And I recognized this weird branding thing that was going on at the time. And it was very obvious that these glassblowers were becoming smart about their work and very branded in a sense. And I didn't really have anything to work off of. It was just
yeah,
me
trying to find your voice.
Yeah, it was just me throwing darts at the board, hoping I would hit a bullseye with techniques coming out of these classes. And and I remember making tons of mini tubes. I remember making a bunch of mini tubes. like I would go into the studio and I remember the first day, actually, I remember coming to you and being like, yo, check these out. We should make a mini tube. We should make a mini tube. And this was early on, like Instagram had just popped up. Rigs were not really a thing at the time. I remember someone came to the studio when we were working there and asked for a rig, and it had like an 18 mil nail on it. It was so random.
Yeah.
And
like, what the fuck is this?
yeah, it was so weird. And,
well, hey, I'm gonna cut you off real quick. 'Cause we have got a lot of things to back up on to discuss here, but I want to kind of like summarize where we're at right now too, just because like 15 minutes in, and I want to kind of, you know what I'm saying?
do your business.
I just want to cover some shit here, dude. But yeah, man. So basically, here's what Mike, like where you are right now, and from where you started off with, like you're saying, you know, you didn't go to college, but to me, it seems like you've kind of gone to the university of trying and exposing yourself to all this shit and potential ideas and concepts and techniques in the glass world, whether it was intentionally or not, you know?
Yeah.
And starting, you know, early on with me, for myself personally, and that whole environment, you know, we converted like this old building that GE owned that had computer software shit in there. It was just like a weird, strange room. They're like, let's put a studio in here. So I had like this, you know, endless amount of money I could spend, built like the dream studio, quote unquote, without permits and shit on their end, so they shut us down. But for me, it was a good trial period too to learn how to teach, because I had like 6 of you guys. I had no idea, nothing. And then I started you on Carlisle's, which is kind of crazy. But, you know, it was a good kind of like, you know, we got to do this now. Let's get a crash course. And that's what I did with you guys.
Oh, yeah. It was like 2011 was like crash course in proto. Like that 2011 to 2013 set me up for the rest of my life. And it was all to that proto concepts that you laid down first. I felt like, if anything, the wrap and rake was the biggest thing you showed me. And that really put me into a position where I recognized that pattern could be applied to glass, and that pattern could then be manipulated further by getting the glass heating the glass up, stretching it out in certain places, maybe not all the places. And, certain places would hold that pattern. And, you know, very early on, I was just working the black stuff, but I very, very firmly remember the wrap and rake. I remember 3/4 of the people in that shop could not figure out how to melt the damn thing in.
Yeah.
And, I remember that was a trialing piece for me. That piece I struggled with for a long time, just doing the wrap and rake. I remember a good majority of, I mean, you survived for 15, 20 years off the proto line that you kind of invested into that whole space. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that was an awesome time. I mean, I think the last thing we ended off on when I worked there was like Sherlocks and Gandalfs, and I make those today. I make that product today.
Yeah, which is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
You know, but it's cool too, man, because then
I make more on it today than I did then, which feels good.
Yeah, I'm sure that's awesome. But then, you know, I look at your transition over to Zen, and Zen was guys that I had known for a long time. I mean, you know, we've all been friends for almost 20 years in this whole madness of glass. And, you know, going from me to them was really not a whole lot of difference for you, except you went to a studio that was kind of being already there, established, better space at least. But they were the same mindset that I was in. Like, my generation has always been like production. We're like the generation, not even your generation, but even like the generation after you in a sense, doesn't have to necessarily do production. I think they should, but what the industry is, you know, now. So you've had a chance to like,
sure,
you've had a chance to learn all, you know, the basics, expose yourself to the production side of things from my generation to then your generation, who's learning from us, the generation of people that are showing them technique and stuff. Like you're saying, you know, you came into a time period where it was in that transition of, no, I'm not showing you shit. I'm throwing a blanket over my bench.
We were just in that transition.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Right in that transition. That 2011, 2012. And, you know, and I came into 2011. I remember being in that studio and you giving me Smoked Volume 1 to kind of like take off and play with and see what I could kind of just mentally come up with there. And it was so early on, but I remember seeing that shit and I remember thinking to myself, there's something here that's so much bigger than what I'm doing right now. If I just hang on to the rail and ride this thing through for a minute, I might figure some shit out that I could potentially not see otherwise.
Fuck yeah, and that's why I gave that to you, dude. Like that first book to be out like that was incredible. Huge inspiration.
I feel like 2000 that was like, and I'm not for sure, but I feel like that book time period wise 2006 to 2009, 2010 maybe, but that book so far ahead of its time with so much of the work that's in there, and even just the introduction to that book, Slinger talking specifically about like the chillum and how that pipe meant so much to him, and kind of giving him a view on glass and community.
Yeah. You getting rain right now?
No, I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it just sounds like you're getting hail's hitting your car.
Oh, I am getting hail. I'm getting a little bit of hail. Is that bad?
Oh no, it's cool. I'm just asking because you're in a fucking hail. I'm just making sure.
No, I'm just chilling. It hails here a lot.
Damn, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So anyways, go on.
Anyways, though, I firmly believe that had I not come into it when I came into it, it's not even firmly believe, it's very obvious I would not be mentally where I'm at. I meet people all the time and I still try to show them production stuff. I very clearly remember just a couple years ago working in a very private group studio, and I remember giving an inside out demo to someone who was, a year on the torch and making way better work than I had been making, and I was already 4 or 5 years on, and this dude was doing amazing work and he was only a year on. But then again, once again, it's all about who you come up around, the time period you've come up in. Now you can really learn a lot with those classes. And on the college topic, you made a comment about not going to college and taking the classes. That is true. I feel like those classes really were that's my college education.
Yeah, you're investing in yourself.
The amount of work that I put out to, these classes, the first class I took was $250. It was very obvious by the second and third class that we were not spending less than $650 to $800.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Classes. And that being said,
it was so worth it though.
And they're 2-day workshops, so it's like, at that time, and then the hotel, all the other things that go along with it. Mm-hmm. And I truthfully was making. Should I go inside? It's hailing.
How long is it gonna last? Yeah, I can hear it.
Let me go inside. Okay. Let me try to go inside somewhere.
They're cool. But yeah, dude, like, I think the overall, like, the expenses that were paid for those classes, like when I went and took this with them to the Steve Sizlov's Quill, and then there's the Joe Peters, Peter Muller classes. The experience alone of going to those classes was fucking awesome. Just being there and around those people.
Can you hear me, or it sound like there's torches running and shit?
Yeah, it sounds like there's torches around it, but it's all right. You're in a studio setting, so.
Oh man, I'm in the shop right now. It's always loud, right? I'm trying to move into a better spot. Hold on a second. How about now? Is it echoey or?
It's echoey, but it's whatever.
Oh man, the warehouse is so loud. We have these metal roofs here too. Anyways, trying to think where I was at.
Yeah, you're talking about the classes, but yeah, like, I think the investment. Fuck, like we're saying, classes were $850. They were awesome at Tea Leaf so I don't know if they're still doing it anymore, but with Gabe doing the trade, a little bit of glass, to help.
Yeah, that was very early on. That was very early on. The trade thing only happened for a short period of time. And then it worked into where it was like, okay, who else can we sell glass to pay for these classes?
Right.
And
exactly.
And it was always proto. We were always hustling proto. It was nonstop production to pay for classes to learn how to make high-end pipe art. And I remember those first few classes, just like you're saying, real quick on this topic. I had a friend. I must have been 17 or 18, but he was obviously older and did not go to school, but went to the library every day, took classes, took workshops, did all of these educational opportunities that he knew would help him advance. And man, the dude was a genius. Like some of the stuff that he knew that I had no idea about was so relevant just to life. And I knew that I needed to go to school. I actually took a semester of college. I did a photography class for like 2 months, 3 months, and I got a job working as a photographer.
I remember that now. I forgot about that shit.
That was really what I was into before glass, was photography. And I've since worked that into my work. That's what glass is, just a vehicle that I'm kind of driving behind. I'm like driving hauling ass some of the time. Sometimes I'm going slow, but whenever I see something on the side of the road that really excites me and gets me going, I pull off and I hang out in that truck stop for a little bit. And man,
That's a great analogy.
classes did that for me. I feel like, groups of people have done that for me in glass, but nothing else in my life has done that for me. Everything else, I feel like I've just kind of led to be what it is. Glass is kind of a Tesla driving itself, and I'm just kind of chilling there, hanging out on Instagram and chilling it, blowing like hell. I got a GTT and a Herbie in the Tesla too.
Yeah, right.
Really just an Impreza.
Well, I feel the same way, man. Like I can tell people all the time, like I feel like Glass is just doing his thing, and I'm the guy behind the wheel and just kind of steering it a little bit. Because I always find, you try to control your glass, it tends to cut and burn you. And you got to just kind of let it do this thing.
The groups, I feel like the groups of people too. Like I put myself in positions where I obviously felt uncomfortable, but it's done so much for me in the long run. And I owe a lot. What's up? Go ahead.
That's the only way to grow, dude. If you're uncomfortable about doing something, it means either get the fuck out of there or you need to be doing it. Like you should be there doing it.
Exactly. I felt that way. I felt like when we were working in that warehouse, like there was a point where I got uncomfortable working there, but it was just because of the environment that was going on in that production.
Yeah, same here. That's why I quit.
The inventory side of stuff. Like I realized really quickly that I did not want to necessarily not work for someone. Lots of knots there, but I want to work for someone. I want to work for myself, And at the end of the day, if I need a little time here and there to work for someone else and grind and get my bills paid and get some stuff taken care of, that's awesome that I have the opportunity to do that. And that's how I looked at that opportunity. Not at the time that I didn't know that that's how I looked at it, but looking back on it now, it was just another one of those small opportunities early on in my glass blowing career that guided me into another opportunity. So
yeah, exactly. And that's what's fun about it, man. Like those kind of things, early on it was like a paid apprenticeship for you. Like you were being paid to learn.
Yes, I was being paid. I was being paid 50
and
cents
to be exposed.
50 cents every black spoon and $4 an hour, and that was great. I felt like at the time. I think I had a buddy who's now just graduated school for like dental practice, but at the time he was very open to letting me live at his place, pay very minimal bills, and I was carpooling to and from the work every day to work in that shop. And anyways, though, multiple shops later, I still say this: every shop I've worked in, someone has said some shit to me that rubbed me the wrong way, but it really showed me something. And man, multiple shops later, I feel like I have kind of put myself in a position now where I feel comfortable about myself because of the things I've learned from all of these different people, and putting myself in those environments are the key thing there, I feel like.
Yeah, exactly. It is. It's so imperative, especially for just growing up, as a person.
Man, sometimes people got to tell you how to do it,
Oh yeah, totally. I agree 100%. And the fun thing too, man, like in your situation, as I was saying, kind of your evolution, you got to a point to where you had enough skill set to really blow up in the sense of yourself and find your voice in your work.
Yeah,
right at the time period of Instagram, social media starting, this whole new generation with like the quote unquote millennial generations in a sense, all this stuff that was happening all started in a sense and really getting the momentum going at a point where you had enough skill and technique to make complete advantage of the situation. Which you have.
I remember when Instagram was first coming around and we were sitting there talking about I remember specifically seeing like Elbow putting his dynos up. There was some Kiwi dynos that he put up, and I remember seeing the quality of the photos. I remember seeing the quality of the marketing behind it, and I recognized immediately that if you figured out something and you worked on that something really, really hard, that eventually, if you marketed it properly and showed it to the right people and you really put love and your heart into it, it would flourish into what you want it to be. And man, on the topic of working in the group studios, again, I remember working in a shop, and it was the Tobacco Leaf studio, and I had a couple guys that are good friends of mine that I worked with there, and I remember them approaching me and saying, what are you doing here? What's going on? Like, where's your heart at? Like, you come in here, you're grinding, obviously know what you're doing. You know, you obviously take every single class with us, but we're all putting like one piece in a week and you're putting like 5 pieces in a day. Like, what are you thinking? Like, what do you want to do with this, you know? And at the time, I felt like I was kind of getting called out for not being cool or doing something the right way. But the more I thought about it, and over the past couple of years, I really recognized that you got to come at it with your all, and having that drive, not just to make the best work, but to put your all into it, all of your energy, your heart, your positivity, everything into it. And you cannot let negativity go into your work at all.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, exactly. But it's also
and you can't let no energy go into your work. That's another bad thing. And that's really what I learned from that whole situation is that for a long time, it wasn't that I wasn't having bad energy in my work or good energy. A lot of time, very early on, and it may have just been the educational side of things that I was trying to suck in. I had very little feeling in my work. I was portraying very, very minimal feeling. Tons of energy.
Yeah, no, expressing yourself.
Jesus, I've worked every single. I still, and everyone works the same way. We all work our asses off. But I very early on, and still to this day, grind as hard as I did early on.
Yeah, well, you know, it's good though, man. Like, you know, you and I both got, you know, we have good work ethic. You know, our dad has always had good work ethic. You know, it's kind of shit. So it's kind of like in our blood. We can't help ourselves. You know.
Yeah,
but,
I feel like it's definitely in our blood.
Yeah. Absolutely. But if you look at your lineage in a sense of your early on days of glassblowing, like myself and like Josh and David Zen are at maybe 17-ish years or 15 years-ish in there, whatever, we were doing production. And you do that for so long, it's hard to take a risk and step away from that to just say, hey, I can make one piece a week where the level of skill set that I have and make more money than I was doing fucking 5 pieces a day, like you're saying. And it's so, you know, a lot of it has to do with, one, it's getting established to yourself to where you can't afford to be able to take away from the production, to step away from it and to work on individual art pieces. But 2, it's taking that risk and having the mindset of, I can do this, you know. I've openly, and I'll say it openly, I've been grinding, man, it might be really unhealthy. I've been grinding 2 shifts every single time I work in the studio for probably the past 6 years now. And it's like, you know, that first shift I come in and I generally either sit around while the kiln warms up and do my business, and or pull points and or do some sort of prep work. But that first shift is generally set aside to throw in $200 in the kiln. And then I generally will work a second shift where there's no real interruption between the two. It just kind of blends into the second one. But that second shift generally involves me focusing on technique, refining my process, trying to come up with things that just make my work feel a little better for me. Because at the end of the day, man, everyone puts out different style, different quality, and I'm no one to judge anyone except for myself. And God, I try to keep it so on that level for me, and it's so hard sometimes not to. But I sit around a lot and I work that second shift to try to focus on myself. Yeah. Well, you have to, and I think that, you know, I've always preached to take one day and just fuck off. You know, try something new. You know, like you're saying, practice technique. But if you can do that every day. Because what I think is cool too is what you said first is that you did your $200, and I've always said, you know, when I teach, you know, this whole apprenticeship type things,
you taught me that. You taught me that. And you know, and the $200 figure, I'm not gonna lie, that's what you taught me. That $200 figure is, and this is just on an open air topic. You are your own boss at the end of the day. That's the God honest truth. If you want to put $200 in, put $200 in. If you want to show up and put $500 in, put $500 in. If you got a product that can make you tons of money, put it in. But at the end of the day, if you are blessed enough to have someone helping you out and someone helping you continue on with your career and your success, that's awesome. If you got to do it for yourself, do what you got to do to make it happen. But I mean, I try to keep that in my mind every single day, that like, it's that same concept of tomorrow's never promised. It's that way for glass too sometimes. And it's like, you know, we'll put it out there. Summer times like that, Christmas times like that. And people ride into that, not expecting that, you know?
Right. Which is why this last episode I just did about Ubering or whatever for like little side money, or fucking learn how to put money in the savings account.
I know glass blowers at Uber, but I'm saying I'm trying to be a glass blower through and through since the day I started. That's why I work the shifts I do. That's why I turn around and put it's not that I have limited requirements in the way of financial standards for myself. Like I have a beautiful place to live, and I've made myself a comfortable place to sleep every night. And I've done that because people have supported the love and time and passion that I have put into my pipe work. And I listen to a lot of it's interesting. A lot of people ask me about this, but I feel like what's continuing pushing me along is seeing the guys that came up with the techniques originally. I see all these guys putting out all this crazy work and spending all this time on these amazing pieces. And I don't know if they're selling. They could be, they might not be. But that's what I want to do. I want to put out my own amazing work. So I kind of like constantly am leaning back on the guys that I see come up with the techniques originally. And I'm just kind of, once again, riding behind the steering wheel, just moving along, hoping that, I see summertime roll around. I know things are going to be the way they are. I'm grinding proto 2 shifts every day. Wintertime rolls around. It's cool as can be. I love it. I have a little heater under my bench. I grind 2 shifts a day. There's a reason why you work as hard as you do in the beginning, and it's so that later on you can really enjoy being a creative soul and a creative energy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, man, because like once you get your techniques down, there's nothing more that you want to do than to be like that. To not have to go in there and do production. You want to just make art.
Yeah, you figure out. I remember when we took the classes. I remember early on taking classes and learning about ring seals and coming home and like all I wanted to do was make rigs, but I still had these orders for these spoons to get made. It's the same hustle every day. Now it's and that's what I'm saying. I see people putting out such amazing work, complementing techniques that have been around in glass for hundreds of years, and it's like, wow, I want to take the time to try to complement that technique in my own way. So I need to work 2 shifts to be able to do that. That's where my head's at. And don't get me wrong, I take some time to myself. I do still rest, obviously. I'm still alive, but I openly try to stay at the studio as much as I can, hoping that something will kind of pop up in between putting $200 in there, $300, $400 in there a day, that will kind of spark my second shift,
Yeah, absolutely. But it's what and on that same topic, which I want to cover, here in a little bit, your in terms of your characters and your lurker stuff. But early on when you were learning these,
nobody really knows that. Like I for
well, don't no. I'm gonna get there eventually.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm backing up to your beginnings for this sculpture because I remember after you took that Voorhees class, you were
lots of shit in the beginning.
Yeah. So the lurker stuff, so I remember we had the studio that everything in my life was falling apart because I was doing too much at once, kind of bullshit, at that old studio. But you were coming in there and you were like, dude, look at this fucking Jesus seal. Like, you're learning all this shit from these classes that I had really never taken the time to even YouTube it or look it up, and here you walk in showing us this stuff. And then you started doing your character work, and you'd been doing a little bit over at Zen, but once you came into our spot with us, you really were focused on this, your little character guy you were doing. We did the little collab with the old and shit.
I think at that time I was doing the sculpted faces. I guess that's what I'm saying is that was just a no name. That was just body of work, and that's what really was going on then. Is I was taking those classes, pulling little bits of information, coming back, throwing right down and trying to implement that into something. And it's so easy to get lost in the social media aspect of things that people don't even see that someone right in front of them hasn't ever done that before. You know what I mean? It's not that I'm trying to implement this into my already growing body of work, but in fact, I'm trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing. And the only way I can do that is to either take classes or sit here and figure it out on my own. And the mix of the two is what brings you your own ideas and your own creative energy. So at that point, I was definitely, I felt like at that point, a lot of the work I was creating was nothing that I can call my own. It was once again, it was like I was pulling technique from the guys that were doing it. And I was just creating I wasn't like ripping off, but I was just creating what I was seeing. You know what I mean? It was.
Oh yeah, dude. And I remember seeing people on, like you're saying, the social media shit. People were, saying you're ripping off and biting and shit. And
everyone. And I see that still to this day on stuff. Yeah, it's so silly.
Yeah. It is. It is. It drives me fucking crazy.
There's so many people too in that sense that when that happened I mean, it was very short on, but it
Mhm.
was like it was very obvious to me that people were not picking up on up and coming artists trying to educate themselves. They were picking up on people coming up with crazy unique ideas, and that's what I needed to do at that time. I
Yeah.
needed
Yeah.
someone to either put me in check and tell me what was going on, and that I was kind of going about things in a weird way, or
Yeah, but you were learning, which is what I
I was
saw.
learning. I had no
You were
school.
trying all kind of shit.
Yeah, it was trial and error. It was trial and error.
Yeah.
It was like it's crazy to say because I have no say in this. It has nothing to do with my time period at all. But in the beginning, that's what it was. It was of glass pipes. From what I can tell, from the people I've spoke to, from the videos I've seen, it was this guy makes this. This guy now tries to make it better. This guy tries to make it a little bit cooler. This guy puts Dichro on it. It was
Hmm.
constantly, and Marcel talks about it. I think Clinton talks about it in Degenerate Art, where it's constantly one upping and getting better and better, and all of a sudden refinement starts to take place, and that's when you actually begin to build your own body of work. And it's so interesting to take these classes from artists who have spent the past 10 to 15 years of their life doing all of that, refining, building a body of work, and now I'm supposed to receive the information and not go home and at least try something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But that's the thing, man. If you look at, say those guys and their evolution, the ones that are successful are the ones that did it right. They learned the medium, they trial and error, they copied each other, they fucked around. 15 years later, they know what the fuck they're doing, and now they find their voice. You've done the same fucking thing in a shorter period of time, but you've done that.
Well,
You've gone.
it's dude. I say it all the time. It's like someone dropped it's like I went to the library, sat down, someone dropped a book in front of me, and it was this massive book, like just as big as can be. And all of a sudden, the top page flips open. There's like a window down the hallway that's open. A massive gust of wind blows through, and the pages just start flipping high speed as can be. And I'm just like sitting there with my hands up in the air, looking down at this book, like, oh my god, I'm just like sucking in this information. And man, the first, I would say, 2 years of classes, I was just taking classes because I was learning ring seals, and I was learning how to sculpt a face, and I was learning how to make eye millie. And then I remember taking classes and showing up to a class and being like, why am I here? What am I going to receive from this? And man, that big book just continuously is opening up. And it's like you're saying, short amount of time, lots of information, that those pages are just hauling ass. And it's all of this information that these guys in the industry, yourself, the people I've taken classes from, anybody that has shown me anything, they've worked years for that. And I understand that and I respect that. So at some point, I definitely, within the past couple of years, grasped that idea that, you need to come up with your own creative ideas, complementing the techniques that maybe someone else has shown you.
Yeah, I think it was Joe Scar, and I say it all the time. I need to go back and listen to which episode it was, but he said, imitate until you can innovate. And I think that's it's perfect for this.
That's so funny you say that too. I always quote Dali. It was like a guided tour that's on a headset that you can listen to at the Dali Museum. Very first piece, it's a self portrait, and Dali is referring to it's a self portrait, slight angle. The guided tour, the voice behind the guided tour, kind of gives you an idea that maybe Dali is pulling techniques from other artists at the time who would have done self-portrait work. As you go along the exhibit, you start to see that he does. There's like a basket of bread, and he paints this basket of bread so perfect in correlation to the previous piece that they're describing that this is now his refinement. And the only reason he even is pushing his refinement this far is so that when he's ready to step into his own world and do his own thing and have his own voice, people don't take him as a joke. People take him serious. And the weird stuff that he puts out into the world, people are going to accept and understand that, wow, this is a highly skilled artist, highly refined craftsman. And he, at the end of the day, has amazing talent that he's now incorporating his unique ideas into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing. It's true.
So it's like you have
cool.
to compliment the people who are already succeeding. You have to, and man, they say this quote: you take the art of the past, you try to create art in the present, and you become the art of the future. And it's like,
Interesting.
you just have to focus on, the people who are creating art now. They're doing it based on the past 10 years of their body of work, and all I can do is compliment it until I'm ready to have my own voice. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, totally. But man, on that same note, I love watching or seeing artists that, whether it's a painting or a drawing or whatever, computer stuff, that's able to take something that they're creating and make it look like it was done 100 years ago, like in that type of technique.
That's
not
cool.
Something like, you know what I'm saying, like not modern, like people that can actually draw like a child
I feel
drawing,
that way
you know
about I know other art, but in glass, I feel that way about the copper work, the electroforming stuff. That stuff always makes me think that it's like antique.
It's like OG, yeah, totally.
Like,
Absolutely.
I mean antique, like it looks like it came off a boat or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that was
It
that was part of like what my whole thoughts were back in the day when I had a whole line like that, like the Depression era type of style, work.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I love that. I love that with the contracts too. I see a lot of guys that'll do full pieces out of the contracts tubing. I love the way that looks. I think that looks
exactly.
unique.
Yeah, fuck yeah, dude. It's like Josh Hammer does that hobnail technique, that pattern wise, and that's like an old traditional Depression era style where you have like the larger dot that goes down to a smaller dot, kind of pattern.
Yeah, cool.
Shit looks gnarly, but yeah, man. So yeah, it's interesting taking this perspective on the classes, because together you and I took Steve Sizelev and Coil, which was my first time taking a class ever. Really, I've been exposed to other artists. I started off doing an apprenticeship early on, but really in terms of like where I am now, that was my first exposure to taking a class.
Yeah, can we talk about that? What a class!
Dude, it was fucking incredible, and
that was the best class, I think. One of the best classes I've ever taken. I'll say one of the best classes I've ever taken.
Man, I'm glad it was the first time being exposed to taking a class, because not only getting to meet Coil and Steve Sizelev and who they were as people, but the amount of knowledge that, I was like 5 minutes late to the class, so I didn't get to offer my opinion on some shit. But they ask everybody, hey, okay, what do you guys want to learn today? And they have a whiteboard and they write everything down. And then those guys scheme. First time those guys worked together.
Did you pick up right then and there when they wrote all that down? That right there. If you could do all of that, you had something going. Like that's where I was mentally, and that's
absolutely
what they did. That's what they did.
Yeah, and that's what was fun for me, dude. Because like I was exposed to seeing artists that I'm not saying, I'm not at their caliber necessarily in that world of glass. But I have the technique and the skills. I took that class, and for me, it just fucking polished the turd I was making, And then I got home, and I refined everything, seeing the fact that they were using a blow hose with a hand torch. Like, why the fuck I haven't had this thing for 10 years? You know what I mean? Like, those little simple things. Like, I like going to those kind of places now and seeing a bench just to see how they have their tools laid out and their setups, and watching their hands work. Not watching the glass and stuff, but like watching the flame properties or their hands doing a certain technique or their movements and stuff, see how fluid they are. Especially with those two guys having never worked together before in terms of teaching a class like that in a collaboration sense.
Yeah.
So it was cool, when that female bubble trap piece that Steve was working on, and it fucking cracks and breaks. And I'm like, I thanked them over the little intercom thing, talking to him, that I'm glad that happened, because we all got a chance to see that.
What piece was it? What piece was it?
It was that bubble trap female he was making.
Okay,
that torso.
so I remember that Haterade bear. It was like Haterade. It was like Haterade over mint, and it cracked. And he had no idea why it cracked. Which obviously those greens are sketchy, whatever. But I just got back in my car. The hail stopped. But anyway, cool. I remember that crack too. I remember just that class opened up my eyes to like, wow. I also do that. That also happens to me.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, man. And for me too, it was the fact that glass blowing, we do this because we fucking love it, but also because it's fun. Yeah. It's just, people always ask me at work all the time.
They were good people.
Yeah, man. And these guys, they grinded until 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and it was fucking crazy. It was amazing, seeing these guys doing what they did. And
I feel the same way about Joe Peters too. That Joe Peters, Joe Peters in general, I feel the same way about. He's a grinder.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was cool with the Peter Moeller class, and Peter's in a sense new to this, into the lamp working, quote unquote. You know what I mean? Compared to him being a furnace worker, where Joe's, I don't know. Long story short, it was cool to see both these guys and their individual setups. the two guys had worked together for years and years and years, but we got to see them work together on the torch and what they were capable
You're
of
saying
doing.
Mueller, and you're saying Mueller and
Joe Peters.
and Joe Peters. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was super cool.
So that was, it was neat. And the fact that they were like, hey, why don't you guys come into the studio behind us one at a time or two at a time and like stand over our shoulder, and which I thought was fucking amazing too.
Man, I remember those classes. I was taking those classes at that time. This is what I mean. Like I was taking little spurts of the year and focusing on specific things. I remember those classes in particular, the size love coil class and the Peter Mueller, Joe Peters class. I was focusing on trying to see big builds go down. Like at that time, I was running a 9x9 kiln. I think you had like a 13 by 9 kiln, and we were just really working with limited space, but I knew that some big things were possible. I had seen some of those Pipe Classic videos that were floating around. I had seen this Jason Lee video, which I constantly refer back to, this engulf video. And I saw that these big pieces were possible. And I knew when I saw those guys coming in for those classes that I was going to see some work go down, big builds. And I remember that Joe Peters, Peter Mueller class, the dragon that they built in that class was the most impressive piece I had seen at that time. It was like a patchwork dragon, and it had all these pins all over it. And
it was so amazing.
Watching Joe flip the handles in between the belly and the head did a lot for me. And watching him do the perk on that did a lot for me. Joe's got an eye, and I see it when I look at his work. I see it when I watch him blow glass. He obviously has an eye for shape previous to the glass even coming into his hands. Like he sees a chunk on the bench and he can visualize that forming into something. And that's not something that I'm really good at. So seeing him shape a couple basic components that would later get built into his piece as either like a leg or an arm, even those pins really helped me understand having an eye for the material and an eye for diameter of material going into a project, like setting yourself up with not just the right prep, but maybe you have the right prep lying around. There it is, go ahead and shape it into the thing. That kind of idea.
Yeah, cause like I remember that the leg of the dragon, or the hands and two, I guess, and he like had a rod of glass and he marbled them down and necked them down and had like these little sections, and he knew that this was the thigh and this was the calf muscle, like, and had them all matched up and perfect. Seeing their little toolboxes with all their little pieces in all throughout it. All of Peter's little pins and buttons already pre-made, and all Joe had all these little chips for his fucking honeycombs all done up. It was a different perspective.
Wild, man. The Millie work in that class was wild. That class was insane. Those classes really, there was a time period there. I would say, I started taking those classes 2013. I still take classes to this day. I just got back from Camp Wanna Make a Heady.
Nice. I didn't know you went to that.
I went to Camp Wanna Make a Heady, and I still will tell you that even up until that point, the things that I see, man, those classes. It was definitely that Joe Peters, Peter Mueller class where I started seeing like little pieces of prep work coming to the class already done, or like people spending tons of time on these little components and then having them ready to go when the project was getting built, And
like when he told us how he made his millies, his honeycomb millies, like he literally said, "This is how we do it," and I'm like, no wonder those things are fucking so expensive.
It's just a lot of. I was saying this to someone today. If you look at like really, really good art and you look at just like art that is visually like appealing to you, really, really good art has like a voice of its own because of the energy and the time and the voice that the creator themselves have put into it. Like you have flourished this from nothing into something where a lot of people come up with real catchy, not nichey, but catchy, ideas, and man, it's so easy to play off of pop icons or iconic characters. It's easy to play that into your work and let that kind of develop who you are as an artist, which is such a beautiful thing to see. I see some of these guys doing, specifically like in Millie, I see guys doing Millie of like famous people, and oh my god, it blows my mind. Like that's really where my vision is at in the way of like Millefiori. Like what a way to capture a portrait of someone. And but then on the backside of that, you see people incorporate Millie into a piece that may have taken them months to just even come up with the components around the Millie itself. And then you look at that Millie and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, like the energy that went in this. So it kind of has a voice of its own in that sense. And it's that's the difference between, I feel like, in my opinion, seeing really, really good art and art that just speaks to me visually. Like emotionally gripping art has energy into it, where you show up to the bench with 2 months worth of work already going on, and it could just be a mini tube. It could be broken again at the end of the day if you may not even finish it.
Well, yeah, man, and that's a good transition too in your time period, because you got to a point where you were fine tuning your blown glass.
Dude, I'm so glad you're saying that. It was so weird. It was like I came into glass, I got the kick in the ass of proto. I sweated my ass off day after day after day, making weird Fritz spoons with Marias all up and down them, and selling them for no money, and selling wrap and rake spoons for no money, and selling all this work for no money. And then I was able to get a class. I remember it was glass for me kind of just naturally evolved. Like I said, sitting behind the wheel, and I'm a person that likes to be in charge. I'm a person that likes to know where I'm going. I like to know who's coming and going. And at the end of the day, having a grip on reality, having a grip on my own life, while also still kind of letting glass take control. It's like, God, I feel like I got a baby leash, or rather the glass has the baby leash on me. Like I'm wearing, like the glass, the torch is wearing like a little lion backpack, and there's like a leash running down to me. And we're kind of playing back and forth with each other all the time. And
go on.
So interesting. Just so interesting.
Yeah, I was kind of like, when using with guests at Disney, I talk, they talk about asking me a lot about the how I learned kind of shit, or when I get frustrated with stuff, and I always refer to it like the glass as like the bicycle, and you're on this bicycle and you're just pedaling away, and then you get to a point where you get something new in front of you, a new obstacle of some sort, a new technique, you want to call it. And then it's so frustrating because you're really trying to fine tune it, and you can do it because you've done everything up until that point. But then you really don't know the technique. You don't have the muscle memory built in yet and developed. And then after, a couple of weeks of getting pushed down off the bike and getting back on, and you get pushed off the bike and you come back on. If you can get past that shit.
I feel like you told me it's like 1 step forward, 10 steps back, everything.
It is, yeah, absolutely.
You've always told me that. And I live that to this day. I tell people that all the time. People will
it's funny.
People in the shop that are pissed off or something. I'll see people break stuff and not be pissed off. And I'm like, why aren't you angry right now? It's 1 step forward, 10 steps back. You should be aware, number one, of that. Number two, you should be trying to motivate yourself to be better. Not necessarily the shop I work in now, but in shops that I have been in. I see people, man, it's just crazy. To be able to have that drive is it's a hard thing to have.
It is hard, man. That's why this isn't for everybody. It comes down to it.
It's interesting because you see a lot of guys that break stuff, and they'll come back to it and not do anything different. That blows my mind. You have not. What are you doing? You haven't done anything different. You haven't thought about it. In fact, you once again, the reason why I took those classes in the beginning, because I saw other guys taking classes. When I started taking the classes and recognizing they were doing something for me, it was when I started taking classes and trying to soak in information for specific reasons. Color prep, big builds, eye millie, sculpting faces, mini tube, recycler. Like I didn't just go to classes because I wanted to meet the dude who was there. In fact, 3/4 of the time, I knew coming out of that, I probably wasn't going to see them for a long time because in a sense, I put myself in my studio, and so do they. It's I'm not going there to create a friendship. I'm going there to fulfill a gap that is in my work and kind of complement it with refinement based on this guy's knowledge. And a lot of people break stuff. A lot of people will go through those ups and downs like we're talking about, of getting up and down and getting off the bike and getting back on the bike, falling. And I don't understand it. They get back on it and they fall right back over, and they're not asking themselves, what can I do to change this?
Yeah, exactly.
If anything, that's what I learned from those classes is you see those guys sit around and talk about stuff.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say. That same thing, bro. That was the biggest thing I got out of those classes was how to approach glass in the sense of what's the next move, like using the term the next move going to be. What's 4 moves down the road going to be? Like it's a chess match. I'd never even in a philosophical concept thought about that whatsoever. It was like I pull a point, I wrap the glass, I fume it, I shape it to a spoon, push a bowl, pop a hole, I'm done. It was never how do I approach this piece I'm about to make.
It's so interesting when that torch like you could work your entire life in front of a torch. There's so many old glass blowers out there who I bet literally turn that torch on and do the exact same thing every single day. I know there is, especially in the scientific field. And man, that torch at some point, and I just said this to a shopmate the other day, it has to be like you have a third arm coming out of your stomach, and it's like the torch is like mounted to that, and it's like all a part of you. Like everything you're putting into it has to just be like creative and moving forward. And why is this happening? What's going on? It's like it's inside of you, like the ideas, the creativity, the technical advancements that are there. Man, so many people think you got to learn how to blow glass. You just have to open the door for the next thing. It's right there. It's so close. Like it's so close every time. And you just have to be aware that that shit breaks. And I think Deppy said it. Someone said it. It's in it. If you're not breaking it, you're not pushing the medium, because that's what's going on. And I think that's in that This Is a Pipe book that just came out. It says that somewhere in there on Deppy's page, maybe where like you're breaking stuff, you're pushing it. That's what's going on. That's the medium. You know what I mean? And if you're not trying to fix what's going on and not break it, then you're not becoming a better artist or a better craftsman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. You know, and I just like with work recently, the last, I guess 8 months ago, I started making this figment or trying to get them done for approval. And it was literally like I had to do 12 revisions, and it took me 6 months to get this thing done. And it was, to date, in the last 20 years of doing this stuff, or almost 20 years now, melting glass, so far has been the most frustrating time period I've had.
The dragon.
Yeah, he's like, the dragon.
Oh, I see.
And there was just, the beginning process was getting all the proportions down. And once I nailed the proportions, the way I designed his pose is he's kind of squatting down a little bit. And to get that squatty look, there's a certain angle that his thighs have to come off his body at the right spot on both sides, almost perfectly symmetrical, to make this thing look right. And there was something that I was doing wrong. I just couldn't figure it out. So Joe Brubaker showed me this technique. It was like a light bulb went on in my head. And that one small little thing that he shows me has now changed.
You talking about this. You talked about this in a couple episodes ago.
Yeah, man, and it's changed everything that I've done since then. The way I approach proportions on things, like having, like, he basically made a ball of glass, and he's like, memorize this ball of glass, and it was like a little bit smaller than a cherry tomato, and I knew that piece of ball of glass coming off around a 16 millimeter solid rod was all I needed to make his thigh.
Sure.
And then once that trigger in my head kind of registered, it's now I see like everything I'm creating now is like this amazing meal I'm about to make. I know all the ingredients and that are going to go into it, and it's going to come out fucking delicious in the end.
That's what I was saying earlier about making like really, really good emotionally moving like art is having all of these little ingredients. Man, there's a video that's on Kevin Murphy's page, like deep in his page, and a shopmate just showed it to me today, but where he has sections all laid out, and it's like months of work, and it's just sections. They're not even flipped. There's like opals that are encased. You got to do that. You got to have it. You got to have the ingredients, and it's crazy when someone shows you something like you're saying with your buddy. This is at work, you're saying?
Yeah. Joe's been working.
That's even crazier too, because I'm assuming he does. What does he do? Soft glass or boro as well?
He's a boro sculptor, and he's been working with us, I think, for about 35, 40 years now.
That's what I'm saying. So so you're getting all of that information.
He's a master sculptor, dude. Yeah,
you're getting that information. Yeah. So it's like the people that are sitting here that are like taking in the information and quickly making things like, just a few months into the torch, that's really awesome that they are receptive of information, and that they can then turn around and make something that is usable and sellable and marketable for them. And at the end of the day, I really ask myself though, like are you just pulling little experts from other people's information, or are you truly like diving into the artist you're pulling information from, are you truly diving into their life and trying to drag the information out from, I mean, let's be real, 40 years of information, like, and then he shows you that one little move. There's so much that went into that over that 40 years, and it's such a simple little move.
And that's what he said to me. He's like, he's like, just do this. And I'm like,
Right?
yeah, Joe, it's really simple for you. I said that to him after doing it for as long as you've done it.
I think that way
Yeah.
about Millie and drawing all the time.
Yeah, and I work, dude. I kind of just like sarcastically say it to guests when I'm doing certain things. I'm like, hey, it's just that simple, But then I'm like, it's actually really not, and it only happens maybe 1 out of 5 times, kind of thing. But it gets to a point where it becomes second nature to you, but you have to repeat that process. Think about the very first thing I fucking showed you from day one, dude, was pulling points.
Yeah, pulling points for sure. Yeah, and that's another thing. I know a lot of people who have never even pulled points. Like that's
It's crazy.
Such a thing that I feel like you should do. Not necessarily because you should be a point puller. Someone told me, I think it was germ, and it was in a germ class with Voorhees, and I believe he said something like, a good glass blower is a well-rounded glass blower. And I've heard so many people since then say that, like, you're not just good because you can make a baller recycler. If you can't pull a point at the end of the day, I mean, that doesn't not make you good either. That just doesn't mean that you're well-rounded. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
you should,
exactly.
and once again, 2 shifts a day. You know what I mean? If you were playing professional football, it would be the same thing. If you were doing any sort of sport that you did for a living, you would be waking up in the morning and training to be able to go play at night. And that is exactly what's going on here every single day. That's what you have to be able to do. I feel like not necessarily don't take time off, don't give yourself rest and relaxation, but when you show up to work, you should be showing up to not only put creative energy into the air, but complement who you are as a human being and refine who you are as a craftsman by just doing some work that the general public might like, something that might do your hand skills a little better. The pulling points thing is a game changer. I know so many people who, people I see put out crazier work than me that struggle pulling points. I see people that put out crazier work than me that struggle doing inside out spoons, and it blows my mind.
Yeah, man. I still laugh about, like, I wonder how many people can actually drop a down stem into a bubbler can.
Yeah, and there's so many ways to do that too.
Yeah.
And like that's another example. Okay, so like for years since 2014, almost every class I take, I've been like, they're like, what do you guys want to see? And I'm like, big push bub. I always say that. And ultimately, I want to see the build of those big push bubs go down, like the old school Sheen, the Jason Lee styles, those big push bubs. I want to see those go down, which now at this point I've been able to kind of add that into my little toolbox that I've created. But that being said, the down stem, it's always crazy to see someone drop a down stem because so many people do it so many different ways. And at the end of the day, do it how you feel, man. Like if you want to do something because you think it's the right way to do it, good luck. And
if it's clean and it works, fuck it.
I mean, there's some very specific ways to do some very specific things. Don't get me wrong. There are clearly very specific ways to have refinement in your work and get the exact same result every time. That is production. That's figuring that out. But until you figure that out, just go for it. Good luck. You know what I mean? And you either, what's going to make it better for you is if you're open to advice from people coming up and telling you you're doing it wrong. And or if you openly tell people, I have no idea what I'm doing. How does this look? And let them tell you, let them be real with you, because your shop mates, at the end of the day, I tell people this all the time. For years, I felt like I was not necessarily trying to build myself up to be something, but I never really cared, I guess, what my shop mates thought of me. I just thought I was renting space in a shop with a bunch of other guys that were renting space, and headphones in, you go to work, you dip out at the end of the day. And that studio in 2000, I think it was 2015, Tobacco Leaf Studio up in Tallahassee, Florida. My group of friends then, they opened my eyes tremendously to having an appreciation to your work and the refinement in your work. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, and that's the same thing.
And
I've
asking questions and asking the questions. You got to openly ask questions.
Dude, how many times did people tell you to shut up every time you ask a question at the classes?
Oh man,
you and me were both asking questions, dude, and you have to.
That's still to this day. Like I'll sit there and I'll be like, "Did you just do what I think you just did?" And people are like, "Duh, of course that's what he did." Well, okay, I'm glad that you saw it. I'm trying to like clarify. Like I'm like,
yeah, you're just verifying that shit.
Yeah, someone's put information out there. I'm taking the information in. I'm reworking it in my mind into an idea. And now I'm asking him if what I just saw is exactly what he did, because the ideas are already churning there. You know what I mean?
Well, the thing with that too, man, like you look at I'm only saying this because of the recent, like the last year that I learned the hot shop stuff. And when Charlie was showing me the furnace work, he was like, you do this and you do this, and he's like telling me this stuff. I was listening to him, but I was also watching his body mechanics, because there's so many things that as an artist, when you learn the material, you know how to counterbalance and react. Just the minute little smallest tiny thing you could do makes all the fucking difference in the world. And there's things that you do that you can't say you're doing just because you don't realize you're doing it, because it's just a natural thing that you do. And once you learn this material, you can take a class.
That's so funny you say that too.
You watch, and you watch these guys working. That's what I'm saying. My perspective is completely different from, I mean, obviously from anybody's, but you and I here in terms of this show, when we took these classes together, because I'm going there refining myself, but also saying, okay, I'm already doing this, I'm already doing that, I'm doing this. They actually made me feel better and more confident about my work.
That's what I'm saying. Yes.
Because I knew what I was doing.
Crap, this is what's going on. I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing the same.
But I also learned and saw little small things.
I feel like that turns people off from classes sometimes, like going to a class and being like, oh, I already knew that. Like, dude, shut your mouth. Like you are here to learn how he does it, whether you do it a certain way or not, whether you like to do it a certain way. Like, man, I've seen just recently, I was at a class and someone got asked to leave mid-class, and it's their own fault. And it was because they openly came into the class saying over and over again, I do it this way. I don't need to learn that. I do it. Well, I already do it like this. Like, why are you here?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's fucking stupid.
What you just said, what's interesting though, I think, about how you said the soft glass guys, how they come in and they're just doing stuff like it's like they're not even thinking about it. It's just happening. Mm-hmm. I see that with the soft glass guys too. And the more and more I notice that soft glass things from soft glass, luckily at Zen, they had a soft glass studio set up. So I was always in there seeing something going on soft glass. And a buddy of mine, Christian, is the soft glass artist there on hand. And his team was constantly producing work that gave me that view, what you just said, which is, this is just happening freely. Like, they're just moving. They're got the glass. They're in there. They're out. They're in. They're out. They're in. They're out. And it's over and over again the same thing. And I had done the production for years, from learning from you for a couple years, 2-3 years at that point. But it never really sunk into me that that was how art was going to be as well, and how higher end work was going to be. Eventually, it was just going to be second nature. And I remember taking a Matt Robertson class and asking him specifically in the class, how are you coming up with that draft? How are you coming up with that draft? And he said, it's a draft. What do you mean? I remember being like, oh, I know that it's a draft, but I'm saying, like, visually, like, and that's the Joe Peters thing. That's where Joe has that I later grasp. It was like I had to take a different class to realize what Matt was saying. So what Matt was saying is that I can, and then I just recently picked up on this. This is something that I just kind of figured out on my own, is that Matt was only complimenting his sculpting technique by creating a character that he was familiar enough with, that was complemented by the technique that he could bring to the table at the time. And that alone is what has evolved that draft for him. Like, in the beginning, if you actually looked at it, he literally Google's, it was like he had pulled a draft image from Google and was making the drafts. And now the draft has kind of become him in a sense, and what he's doing. And the draft it's just interesting to see that type of evolution. And that's really where my head's at now, if anything.
Yeah, man. Well, that's how my owls came to be. Same kind of thing. It's like I was trying to make one for a guest, which then turned into kind of my spin on this, so that then became a refined piece. that then I was like, oh, I can put personality in these things. It's when I started seeing the Matt Robertsons and those kind of cats out there that were creating animals or characters wise that they were able to put personality in.
Yeah. In the face, I see it in the face. I see it in the face. Like I saw Matt's face change, but specifically, like Matt just recently did a like I think it was last year, maybe the year before. He did a draft on an exercise bike, and nice. He has that exercise bike, like he owns that. I worked at his shop for a short period of time, and I was able to kind of put myself in a position to pick up on what he was doing. I guess on I had no idea at that time that really the drafts were him. I was just seeing the drafts. Once again, it's like, I was making all the production for so long, and then I had to see someone also doing production in an artistic sense to realize that I was learning these hand skills. Plainly, one day they would just become second nature, and I wouldn't even think of it as a technique or a skill. And that's what I saw Matt doing. Matt was at the point when I was there in his shop. He was at the point where he was no longer sculpting a refined draft, but he was actually implementing the draft into sculpted things that were very, very advanced. That exercise bike piece was very advanced. He did a piece with hooves that was it was like I believe it was a cow in a giraffe, or maybe a zebra in a giraffe playing basketball with each other. And that piece, like the little components now of the work was what he was kind of experimenting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, like you look at Banjo's work, like how his stuff has evolved over the last decade.
Banjo's work is a prime example. Like I remember seeing there's like a 3-second little spurt of a clip in Degenerate Art where he's working on this big wasp woman, and I've seen him post about how those early series of the women and the sculpted figures were just pawns and characters in the game of his Devi and what he was creating. It was just like a compliment to where he is now. It's just the evolution of where he is now, So it's like you constantly. That's what I didn't pick up on for a lot of years. I would say 2000 mid 2013 when classes started getting real serious, and it wasn't just like dude comes in and throws down some crazy weird technique and then we all go home, but classes actually got like collaborative pieces were going on that were then being sold for like tens of thousands of dollars. It was very obvious. It was very obvious. So I realized between like 2000, it must have been like mid 2013 till what was it? 2015 probably was when I kind of backed off for a short period of time on trying to implement this technique. I realized then and there that that's what these guys had done. These guys had just created a character model, and as they were building that, they were just complementing their character model with the skill set. Eventually, character would evolve into something that was so out there and outrageous and spectacular that all of the advancements, this is that Dali thing again, the advancements, the cleanliness, the refinement, all of those little things that they had been doing all along, eventually when they became ready to kind of have their own voice and speak for themselves in a sense that the worldwide public would see it, they were coming at it with something that was so crazy and out there that people look at Banjo's work still and look at the work he's putting out now. He's putting out like hammers and stuff right now. That's just they're so refined. They're crisp. They have no compliment whatsoever towards the Devi. They have maybe like or two that's featured on the Devis, but it's that Dali idea. It's putting yourself to a level of refinement where people can appreciate on a technical aspect how badass you are and how skilled you are at what you do, to then come back and kind of like give some people some weird stuff that they're kind of like they're like, whoa, what is that, what's that? And then all of a sudden you got the Devi, there's like I think it's Tyson Peltzer and Snick made the Devi that was on the cover of like Juxtapose, or it was in the Juxtapose magazine, but that's a crazy one. It's got like the eye millies all around the back. It's got like the cat skulls up front that are like silver butterscotch.
It's ridiculous. But talking about the refining thing, I was going to go somewhere with it. Man, what the fuck was
that refining thing did not happen for a while. That's what I'm saying. When I was
I know what I was going to say. Go on.
When I was in Tallahassee, when I worked at that Tobacco Leaf studio, up until that point, I was making glass. I was taking classes. I was learning how to drop ring seals. I was learning how to make color prep. I was learning how to sculpt. I was learning how to make milli. I was trying my hardest. I was taking milli specific classes to learn how to make milli, and then coming out of it not really making milli, but implementing it into work and not really going anywhere with it. I was just kind of doing the thing and learning the techniques. And then I got to that studio where and God bless my friends at the time. And there's so many artists I meet that don't have friends like this. Let your friends tell you, or let your friends put you in check, man. Let your friends tell you what's up. Like, not that you got to clean the shit out from under your bench, or that like you got your bench is messy, but like let your friends come up and be like, what is your shit in that kiln right now? Like, what do you have in there? Why are you doing that? And if there's some bad energy in the space from that on, you should pick up on that. It might be you. You might stink. You know what I mean? And at that time, I didn't suck. At that time, I was very motivated to make a lot.
You were hungry as fuck, dude.
I was trying to make a lot of work. Man, it sounds like classic old walking through the snow story, but I remember 2011, I was like pedaling my bicycle to the studio 5-10 miles. And I remember you were working at Disney. We'd run out of propane. I'd throw a propane tank on my bicycle and ride it to the propane place, get the refill, ride a filled tank back on my top tube of my bicycle back to the shop, like a half mile. And, it was, I did it because I wanted to do it. I blew glass because I wanted to blow glass. I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew that I did not want to work a job that I was working before, which at that time I was also working at a Starbucks. I blew glass, 2012. Before I got picked up for the job with you in that warehouse, I was working at a Chipotle.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And I remember pulling a buddy of mine, Toli, from the line at Chipotle and bringing him as our point guard.
He became the shop bitch real quick.
This Russian guy. And
he was funny as fuck.
His name was spelt wrong when his family moved from Russia. His name was spelt differently, and they wrote it wrong on the papers coming into America. So his name has forever been spelt different than his actual family in Russia is. But that's another story. But anyways, it's been a struggle, and I remember being in that shop just trying to grind and survive. And I remember there being some young guys my age at the time, 22, 23, 24, who were really doing some advanced work, some very, very tight, clean, crisp work. I remember some guys specifically doing dot working, like the little tiny mandala dot patterns and like the weird drawings, like, or the flowers that are all dots. I remember there being people coming up with great ideas in that shop, just super creative ideas. And our classroom was in the same building. It was literally like there was like a strip. It was like probably like 20-foot wide strip by like 50-foot deep, maybe 100-foot deep. And there was a bathroom at one end, front door at the other end, and our benches were just on the wall in there. And there was like a midway point where you would walk into another room, same exact size. It was just a dividing wall up between the two rooms, and you would walk into the other room, and it was just an open classroom, big studio table. There was like a lounge area, a small cold working area. And dude, I was obviously blind to the whole thing. It took someone coming up to me and putting me in check. A good majority of the people in that studio at some point telling me, dude, put more into it. What are you doing with this? Like, you're taking these classes. Do you not see us? Like, we're taking the classes too, but we're coming up with like our own unique ideas. We're trying to build stuff, and maybe 2-3 days down the road, it doesn't successfully come out. We don't take a picture of it and put it online. We just throw it in the garbage, or we smoke out of it or something. And I feel like those friends changed my life. My buddy Kyle, Kyle Clark's Solo Glass, he changed my life forever, living up there in Tallahassee. And he had a roommate, Alex, at the time. Both of those guys really did a lot for me, as well as for Rachel, my girlfriend, who also blows glass. And I feel like we kind of left Tallahassee, not necessarily wanting to leave the studio or wanting to leave Tallahassee, but we left Tallahassee with a better appreciation for what we had coming out to where we live now, which is out here in Colorado. And man, it was such an interesting time. I took about 6 months to a year. Actually, I think I did not take. I'm trying to think about the class schedule there because I no joke from 2013 to 2000. Gosh, I guess that was 2016. I took classes 3.5 years straight. I just educated myself. Basically every weekend was taking a workshop,
Mm-hmm.
and
Always calling
and
me
then
like, "Hey, you taking this class, man?"
yeah, right. Always calling everybody. It's just interesting. I take those classes and you'll go there and you won't know anybody. And I'm not a social butterfly. And I guess I am a social butterfly, but I'm not a social butterfly in a class setting. I'm there to learn. And I want people there learning with me that I'm going to come back and only see more of so that we can kind of continuously feed off that same energy. So it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like, for 3.5 years, no joke, I took classes with the same people, the same exact group of 10 people for 3.5 years, took almost every class I took, if not more, because there was a couple there where I couldn't make it. But openly, uh, I just recently started taking classes again. 2016, I moved to Colorado, and I took about 3 or 4 months to kind of just focus on getting set up here. I did a small gallery show in St. Petersburg, Florida, at Zen Glass, and I really just kind of focused on myself. But just recently, I started taking classes again, and it's a completely different group of people. The people that are coming to the classes are far more educated coming to the class far earlier on. Like they're way earlier on than I was,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
with way more information already on them. And it's there's all love there. If they show up with positive energy and they're wanting to learn, that's what is going to happen. If they show up acting like they know everything, it's going to be a shitty time. So
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And that's kind of what I was saying too earlier about like the
3 years ago,
generation.
for 3 years, nobody knew
Yeah,
anything. We were taking classes, like for 3 years, we were taking classes, and the classes were evolving as we were. Like
yeah.
like we were taking classes as the industry was evolving. Wow, what a better time to be taking classes.
Oh
Like
yeah, man.
now,
That's yeah,
all of a
yeah,
sudden,
totally.
all of a sudden, it was like 18 millimeter for nail. I remember going before classes. I remember going down to Wonderland Gallery and West Palm Beach and seeing these demos go down. And I remember first ring seal I saw Slinger, Kurt B, Jop, and Germ demo. And I remember seeing Slinger and Germ both drop 14 millimeter male glass on glass fittings with a Maria in them
With
right
the
in there,
Maria.
and seeing that go on. And up until that point, we were flaring tubes, dropping them in, and then putting like
Yep.
a weird joint on top, and it always looked like garbage.
It always
And
did, dude. It was total game changer.
and so seeing the Maria going was a big deal. And then it was like, the classes would come along, and all of a sudden the male fittings weren't cool anymore. So now it was like, how are they getting those downstems in there, and then putting the joint on as a 90? And it was like, it was like, oh, there it is. We're taking that class because that guy does that,
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
and that is what pushed me along to be where I'm at now. If anything, I would say is the industry moving along at the pace it did, with the guys that had been here the whole time, doing it, figuring it out, also willing to teach classes. Like, man, it must have been hard to be in an industry that was so quickly moving along, and be willing to give out information, and then to be bummed when you see someone come out of that class and trying to do something close to it, just to kind of get a feeling for it. But at the same time, I had no idea. None of us had any idea what we were doing at all. I feel like that even the people in those classes sometimes were coming out of those classes after teaching it being like, wow, I can't believe we just made that.
Yeah, exactly. But and it's interesting too, man. Looking back, from my perspective on where I was in my life of glass, you and I kind of split off in directions wise, and you go to Tallahassee and I go to Disney, and over that time period, you're learning from the best of the best in a sense in the pipe industry, while that pipe industry is growing leaps and bounds, going from 18 mil, 14 mil, back to 18 mil, back to 10 mil, back to 14 mil. It's like all these techniques are being added. It was just crazy. It's fucking chaos. If I try to make it a fucking recycler right now, I'd probably look like garbage. But the direction I went in was to the solid side of things in terms of sculpture and what have you, and understanding glass in that way, learning from the best of the best. I mean, literally, these guys I'm learning from are masters at what they do. It's crazy seeing what they do sometimes. And the same thing with me. I didn't take classes from them necessarily, but I still absorbed all this information and blah, 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 to where I'm at a point now where I feel like what I'm doing at this point in time, I'm completely refined. I'm having fun. Someone gives me a name they want me to make for them. I'm like, yeah, I'll make your name for you. And then they give me one little thing they want to add to it, and I go fucking ape shit with what I want to make. I don't know if you saw that. I did that name recently, and all they asked me to make was this girl's name. It was like her first birthday, so they were having it for like a cake topper for the adults, basically. And they wanted it to have some.
I saw it. Yeah, yeah.
And they wanted some kind of like watermelon added to, like a watermelon slice.
Yes.
So I went fucking crazy with it. And like the watermelon itself, I was like, well, how can I make watermelon skin look real? I literally I balled up some green, wrapped and raked it with white, and then the way I raked it though, it made it look like the kind of the texture of the white of a watermelon. Cool. I had never done it before ever, and I was completely fucking thrilled with how it came out when it was all said and done. Like I knew what the fuck I was doing, and it was because I did. Whether I did realize it or not, once you understand this material,
you were bringing in your hand skills. You were bringing your hand skills into play on something you had never made.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I break it down. I'm like you made a comment about like making a recycler or probably looking like shit. Like I probably would make a shitty recycler too. In my mind, I'm at the point, and this is where I've been for the past few years, I guess. Seeing those guys that told me what was up, Tea Leaf guys, those guys really did the same thing too, and that's what I picked up on from them. If anything, it's like breaking it down, and I'm sure you do the same thing with your sculpting stuff. But like, I will refine parts. And that's where I'm at now. And that's why I don't the work I put out is complementary to refined items that I can make or shapes that I can make. Like that's what I'm trying to complement. So like there you go. You use like the wrap and rake, for that watermelon slice. Like that's that same kind of you're almost complementing the new thing by just bringing in a hand skill that you can hit that off. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But on the refinement side of things, learning this and the perspective that has from learning that little thing from Joe and changing my perspective on my approach for glass and the character representation and their integrity.
Yeah, how'd the character come out with the hip?
Oh, it finally got approved, and within the first 2 weeks I had 30 orders on him, and he hadn't even been put on the shelf yet. And so it got to be 40.
I remember seeing the dragon. But it was like purple and yellow.
Right, exactly. So now he's just clear, and he has the orange, because he has like orange wings and little tail horns and his horns on his head. So those are all color, but the rest of him is all clear. And then he has a paintbrush in his hand.
Love that purple and yellow.
Yeah, me too. Well, as a thank you because we have an art director now. Our art director, her mentor, is the guy we go to at Disney for all of our character integrity, for all the approval processes. So it doesn't leave our warehouse now unless it's 110%. And Adrian's the one that kept busting my balls, which I totally was very appreciative every single time. Refine this needs to be changed. She was drawing me drawings to like really get things tuned in, and then I fucking nailed it. It gets approved, and I made her a full color thing, like a full color figment, and as a thank you. And the only reason I was able to make it full color was because of the couple little things that Joe showed me in technique. I applied that to the color as well, and. Nice. Now, like I said, everything I'm looking at now, all the characters I was already making, I'm now refining those guys completely. And like this Olaf, I've been making him for the last 3 years. I've literally made over 1,000 of them. They all were done same technique, same way.
Started doing it with the blue mouth.
Yeah, right. So that's the refinement aspect of it. But also, there are things about him that I'm looking at now. Like I now know that his butt base is a round kind of ball, like a marshmallow shape, and the width of his butt is the same width as the widest part of his head. His head's like an ice cream cone with a scoop of ice cream on top of it. Sure. So I know the width of his head, which is the top of the ice cream cone, they can't be any wider than his butt width at the widest point, right? So those are like these little ratio proportions things I'm refining in the character, but then adding that blue to it, it really had made me have to change the way I had to learn how to apply that blue, because it's all Chinese glass and this white, Chinese white. I love this stuff, but it's tricky. So I had to really relearn how to make his head. I could make the entire piece back in the day in like 30 minutes. And now it's taking me about 45 with this added blue. But I'll do a couple different variations, practicing, okay, how am I going to approach it this day? And then the other day I sat down and did them. And to me, out of the over 1,000 I've made of this guy, it was the best one I've done to date.
Nice.
Like, it fucking nailed it. And that's the one I'm holding on for myself as a reference now. So I look at this one. If it doesn't look like him, it's gonna fucking rip his head off, and I'll redo it. Whatever I got to do, kind of thing.
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. Like you're, having those items specifically that kind of guide you along the refinement process. That's such a key thing to have because, I mean, I guess that's what I feel like a lot of glass blowers nowadays don't have is they may have a product that they make over and over again, but the product is so advanced that the things that are in the product, they never got the chance to get those refined, So it's like having something that you can make 1,000 of to represent a product, and you're kind of tweaking it and making it a little better each time. That's really cool to be able to do that, especially, I think that with the lurker a lot. It's just something that gives me the play of a simple character, and I feel like that's what a lot of these guys are doing. They're coming up with really clean, crisp lines, really really smooth edges, and the sculpting aspect of it is refined and simple. There was a time period. This is like just on that whole. I talk about the refinement thing all the time. I remember there was a time I'm hanging out with Solo, Kyle, and Alex, and Rachel, and we're all hanging out, and we're discussing. There's like art all on the wall. We always have weird art on our walls and stuff. We're looking at this. We were neighbors at the time. We literally would just like hop and skip back to each other's house and stuff. And one night we're hanging out over there, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. I'm looking at some art on the wall, and I start commenting about how the art in particular I'm looking at is so digital that it's like too far refined. Like I can't grasp any sort of like natural piece of it. And I'm not saying that happens in glass, but what I thought was interesting about this topic is that in art and in life, you're given two sides of it. You're given a raw side and a refined side. And we called this art that I was looking at on the wall, we called it hyper digital, but
Okay.
it was visionary art. It was visionary art. So it was like any of the stuff you see, like the Alex Gray style work, but when it's like really digital looking. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Not like Alex Gray is painted, obviously, but I'm saying
Right.
there's like a side of that where people will come in and like do like Photoshop layers of different animals and stuff, and then at a certain point you kind of lose the rawness of it. Like there's no rawness there, and
Yeah, it's
when
like photorealistic.
photorealistic, well, we were calling it hyper digital.
Yeah. Same. Yeah, I completely understand.
It was so fucking intense, and so intense at the time that we were uncomfortable looking at it. Like it did not bring me any good feelings, any good energy. And then when you look at people's work like the Alex Gray work, you see refinement and a raw idea, like coming up with having a model to kind of work with and manipulate. You get a sense of refinement that is so advanced sometimes. Like, dude, you're the Olaf. You can get that so realistic. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And then there's a point where you're gonna go make just a random snowman, and it's gonna feature characteristics of that Olaf. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna almost
Oh yeah, totally.
naturally fall into that. And
Yeah.
so that being said, when you come into glass, when you come into art, when you come into life, and it's like skateboarding. You can just get on the board and go do a kickflip, and dude, like you just got the board yesterday or something. You know what I mean? Like you have some rawness to you. Not everyone has that, So like what I realized that night, and it's kind of carried me through my work over the past few years, is that I did not have that rawness. I did not approach glass ever coming into it saying I'm a creative beast or energy and I'm going to make what I want to make. I came into it saying I have no idea what I'm doing. I need to pay my bills, help me out, show me what to do. And slowly but surely the refinement process happened. So that being said, the newer guys in the industry are coming up with crazy ideas, and it's like most of the time I see it's pure raw talent. Some of the times I see it, I'm like, this is not talent at all. I don't know what I'm looking at, but the people that are coming out of nowhere, they're getting the recognition for the rawness,
Mhm.
and they deserve it. they deserve it, because through all of the weeds and all of the high grass, they are shining, and like a little blossom of flowers, they're shining because of their rawness, where the rest of the world is kind of like trying to gather food and resources and survive off of refinement. And it's a different way to approach glass. The people that you see making the work that really moves you, they're coming into it with a raw idea and refining the idea. Whether they have the raw talent or not, I don't know, because I don't know them personally. But as I start to meet other artists, as I start to meet people that might not even be artists at all, you start to recognize, wow, this person has that raw energy. I want to be around them. I want to feel that and appreciate that and understand what I don't have. When I'm around people that have what I have, it's hard for me to want to even socialize in that atmosphere, because we're both on the same path right now, and we can talk about it, but at the end of the day, we're not really complimenting each other. We're just kind of like steadily moving along the same road, like seeing the guys that truly have that raw talent, even the young ones. Man, what a great opportunity. Like working in that shop in Tea Leaf, there was a couple guys in there that were very, very new to glass, and very open to the rawness. And gosh, a lot of guys with refinement in there too. And that's such a cool thing to see play in the same studio, because when you have a shop of everyone that is just like, we're pipe artists, we've been doing this for 15 years, we went from wrapping rakes to frit to heady, water pipes to head rigs to the 14 mil rigs. Like, dude, it's the same old shit, dude. It's the same old shit. It's annoying. I'm over it. What I love seeing is mixed studios. That level 42 gallery looks like such a studio. I love the look of what's going on there. There's guys that have been blowing glass for years in there, making amazing pieces, and looks like there's new guys that are just coming in, hanging out. And man, that's always the studios I'm trying to put myself in, is a studio that has a little bit of this mixed raw and refinement, because too much of one thing doesn't really lead you anywhere. That raw shit, I swear to God, I worked in a studio with guys who, it was nothing but guys who thought they were raw talent, and at the end of the day, they were producing nothing but garbage. And it was because
totally.
nobody was coming in and saying, yo, refine that shit, son. You know what I mean? So it's like when you have that mix, all of a sudden shit starts popping off, and real shit goes down, and real energy is being produced. And all of a sudden, so-and-so's got this raw ass idea, but can't figure out how to do the seal for it. But so-and-so over here has been doing that seal for 3 months on the same fucking push bubbler. You know what I mean? So all of a sudden you got this insane piece, like that right there does it for me.
It's fun.
So it's like, it's interesting, like that I kind of carry that through life now. Like, and it sounds silly. It sounds very, very maybe selfish or egotistical or like one-sided, but I very much look at my time on a social level as accepting raw and refinement information from individuals. And is my time here worth it? Is my time here, am I accepting information that is guiding me along on my path? And it's all through glass. Glass has taught me that. Nothing else has showed me that. Nothing in life up until I was 19 has ever said, this person is a good person because this. It's always been like, this person's a good person because they are a police officer, or they're a firefighter, or they're
they're defined.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like that doesn't define who you are. Your fucking raw ass attitude of being a positive person and grinding and having this beautiful art, or you grinding your ass off day after day to refine your art or to refine who you are as a human being, coming into the world raw as a human being. It's like, those are the energies you need to pick up on people. So I play that into my life every day.
Yeah, it's smart. It's it's exposing yourself to diversity. You have to.
Every single play of my life daily is like exposing myself to a mixed group of people. It's like glass blowers and people that understand glass, and then it's like the general public. And when I'm in the mix of both, I'm like constantly just like feeding off of whoever is being real and really bringing it to the table. And man, I go to the post office all the time. I meet some whack jobs at the post office that I'm like, dude, I never want to come back to this post office again. And then I go to another post office and I meet a couple older women who compliment my Jerry Garcia t-shirt and tell me about how they went to a Salt Lake, Utah show in '95. And that right there, it's like the energy they have created alone. Dude, I'm feeding off that. I'm coming back to that, and whether you pick up on that or not, it's like getting a cookie and liking that cookie, dude. You're coming back for another one. Whether you recognize that is what life is, dude, it's like it's life. Life is such a open door to accept information, and you choose to accept what you want to accept, just like you choose to do what you want to do. So at the end of the day, if you're putting yourself in a position to accept that mixed information, man, you can get so far. Like, dude, that's really what you are. And that's why people in glass are doing what they're doing. That's why the collaborative projects that are going on are going as far as they are. That Ziggy's God, it's like a lunar, I don't even know what it is. It's like a spaceship.
Yeah, the telescope,
like
microscope, fucking crazy thing.
Yeah. Okay, with the moon sitting on it. That
thing's ridiculous.
Collaborative effort, not possible without the mixed raw. Dude, right there. Hoobs is raw as hell. Hoobs has refined his raw talent and is crushing things. And for him to come at it the way he did, for all the artists to come in and bring their things to the table, that right there is that mixture that I love playing off of. I wish I could put myself in more situations like that. And it's not an unfortunate thing. It's not that I wish I could and I don't because of some weird reason, but openly, I am just now accepting my own voice and feeling comfortable with myself. And at the end of the day, if you're walking around carrying your glass thinking you're the shit, you're probably not.
Yeah, exactly.
You're probably
100%. No, and you never are. And this.
Yeah, it's just interesting. It's just interesting how people carry themselves to accept information. All I'm doing is accepting information. All I'm doing is sitting here pulling my stuff out of the kiln every day, saying, "Dang, I want to do this better tomorrow." If I'm going to do it better tomorrow, I don't know, but at least I have that that vision or that mindset. I might not portray that on social media. You may get on social media and say, "This one rules, this one rocks," but as a creative soul and as someone who is looking for refinement constantly, even being a raw artist and having that raw talent, you should at least be open to advancing yourself and having some shit to say about your work.
Yeah, completely. Which brings me to the transition I want to get into with, you find your voice and kind of your ways through all of this trial and tribulations in a sense with your glass. And, I remember seeing your work at a point where you started really pushing your Millie stuff. You were getting into
the Millie stuff. God, I'm so glad you know the Millie stuff.
Yeah, so like from my perspective here, watching it from a distance through social media, basically, seeing some things on the side going on, but really seeing this Millie work was when you've really found your space as, okay, this is me expressing myself as an artist, as a visualization type of thing, where you're creating these canvases in pattern, but you're also experimenting with color, you're experimenting with placement of them, how to build them properly. There's a lot of things I was seeing from my perspective of, again, still refining this process until you finally seem like you found this thing that you then incorporated it into stuff you had been doing the previous, say 3 years in terms of shapes you were doing, all this stuff. You basically created a line of work that you were then able to take this technique that to me was your art, that you then put into not even a production. It was a piece of art you're creating. It was fucking crazy.
Yeah. I had this weird thought process at the time that if I spent loads of hours on this pattern and came up with this really advanced pattern and then just put it into a ever so inviting mini tube that someone would appreciate, not the pipe, but the pattern work and the time involved in that pattern work and the Millie work. It's interesting. There was a time period there where I really grew up, and it was overnight, literally, like some shit went down one night. That next morning I woke up and the birds were flying out of the trees and shit was real. And everything was just different. And that Millie, that I recognized right then and there that if I was going to even try to attempt to be the refined artist that I wanted to be, I needed to choose a subject matter and kind of refine that as far as I could. And up until that point, my Instagram, my Instagram at that point was JB_glass. And I believe at some point it was JB Glass Art. I still have both those pages going. But I looked at my past body of work. I used Instagram almost as like a timeline for where I was at in glass. And I had came in and deleted things here and there, but it was a pretty good judge of where I was at in the way of work and pieces. And I specifically remember saying to myself, all right, if I'm going to do anything, I'm doing mini tubes, I'm doing recyclers, I do hand pipes, I do all these pipes. What is something glass related that is so advanced that is now like sought after or collected, and not pipe related, but just something that could maybe be implemented into pipes. And I thought about it, and I honestly, Millie was the first thing I thought of, but I thought of drawing, which I could not do. And I thought of like cane work maybe, which I could not really do either. A lot of that technique, and this is where Millie really became comfortable for me, takes time figuring the technique out to make the prep to then make that. So it's like, to do the cane work, you would have to figure out how to make cane first and then build it into tube. To do, you have to figure out how to make good looking cane. Like anybody could just spin some stuff up and stack it together, but good looking cane, you had to figure that out. Cause that's what it is at the end of the day. It's refinement, and you're not trying to you can't just put wank out there. You know what I mean? So it was like, Millie gave me something where I knew that I could, spend a few days trying to build something. If it broke, nobody ever had to see it. In fact, I didn't even know what I was doing with Millie enough at the time to let anybody see it. So it was not a battle of me like, oh, I need to make money off this. It was like, I really can't make money because I don't know what the hell I'm doing with it.
Right, exactly.
And so I didn't even know how to lens a Millie at the time. And then, there you go. So at the time I'm like, okay, next class, lens Millie. I write in my notebook, next class, make eye Millie. And it was like, that's how it started. The eye Millies, I feel like, were the first ones. And I saw Coil do 2 different eye Millies. I saw Voorhees do a completely third different style of eye Millie, like incorporation into a piece. I saw Matt Robertson do a style of iMillie where he showed up with the iMillie already prepped, so it wasn't really it didn't really help me move along any farther. But it was there. It was like I was like, oh, okay, this isn't helping me anymore. This is nothing's that I need to move on. I've picked up the base idea of the technique. Now let me go kind of implement it. So I started just making iMillies and trying to lens iMillies, and I was putting them on little sculpted characters and faces, and I was making like little head pendants and stuff at the time, and putting them on these head pendants, and that was my first real taste of Millie. Moving along, I took a Stephen Bamey class, which he's famous for his portrait work. And that was at Zen Glass Studios, and a buddy of mine who actually runs the studio, Josh Pohl. He goes by Jash on Instagram. And is that his Instagram? Look that up real quick.
Yeah, it's Jash. Yeah, Jash Glass.
Jash Glass. Jash Glass. JASH _ glass. But he did a Captain Spaulding, and it took him like 3 months. Captain Spaulding is as the clown character from many of Rob Zombie's movies. But it was
Jared, hey, can you give me 1 second, dude? Hold your thought for a second. I'm sorry. I'm just getting like a weird static in my line. I'm not sure if it's the...
Is it me?
No, I think it's me. Okay,
I can hear you fine.
We are now in the present. I would say we're about 2 years ago right now.
Okay, so anyways, but we're talking about the Spaulding Millie. Anyways, Josh,
which is fucking amazing.
Josh did the Spaulding Millie after that class, and it took him like 3 months. He picked it up every day, looked at it, maybe laid a lie down or something at once a week. He'll even laugh his ass off hearing this, but that was how it was. And he knew it, and eventually he got the project done. He works his ass off. He does goblet classes almost every single day, so he's crushing these working with the general public. They're coming in making a wine glass stem.
Yeah, build your own wine glass.
Yeah, basing the cup top around it. So he's grinding, but that Millie got done. I recognized I could do something like that time-wise around my production work. That the drawing wasn't really going to lend that into me right now because I didn't really know what I was doing. The cane work wasn't going to really do it for me, but the Millie work I could kind of work on over a time period. So, after the iMillie, after that, man, I tried to make in that Stephen Bamey class, I tried to make Samuel L. Jackson in that scene where he's in Pulp Fiction, and he's like over the guy, he's like, what does Marcellus Wallace look like? And
Yeah.
it was like that scene, like with his eyes and the gun, and I got the eye component done and just destroyed the rest of it. Like it was not good. And I just sat back in that class and watched him do his thing, Steven do his thing, and but it gave me an idea for this weird big build that I had no idea. Like it gave me proportion. It gave me an idea of like so like where to start. Man, that's something I just recently asked Punny at Camp Want to Make a Heady, like where to start in the drawing, and Millie, it's a really good idea. And this is just like a hint. I'm not trying to give educational facts here, but in my honest opinion, and from seeing Steven work, from asking him about it, he at the time was really key on starting from like the pupil specifically, or like the glare that is in the pupil, and kind of building out that way for a portrait. So I really picked up on how to get the shit going, which was the hardest thing in the beginning.
Yeah,
and
that's smart starting point.
yeah. And drawing's different, but the same kind of idea is you're choosing a place, and that's a question, dude. Like, man, you got to ask questions. Like, that's what these classes are for. The classes are not there so that you can come in and be homies with the dude and smoke J's and take dabs with him. It's so that you can sit there and be like, what toilet paper do you wipe your ass with? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I asked him, I said, where do you start? And he told me, and that advanced me on to the next thing. So anyways, that being said, Millie, there was a time period there where I recognized work was coming out and I saw these weird patterns. I was also very excited on all sorts of shit at the time. And the patterns really set me off. It was like I was looking at a kaleidoscope. It was like the best thing I could ever see. And it gave me, there was this, man, it's hard to explain. I'm into some weird shit. But that being said, I love watching kaleidoscopes pop off with like great music behind it. That seems like a normal thing for anybody to like. But
I love it.
I actually sit there and watch that shit. And like Spangle, or Spangle specifically. That being said, hours go by, and I come to the next morning. I'm like, holy shit, this is what's going on. I need to make this kaleidoscope Millie. I look into it, and of course there's people doing this work. It's very obvious. I'm not dumb. I've seen the work for years. There's multiple artists out there that are paving their way in the industry with kaleidoscope-esque patterns. But it meant something to me, so I was gonna do it. You know what I mean? And that's why you should do shit, because it means something to you. So I chose a subject matter, these kaleidoscope-esque images, and I only put myself forward on the Millie train off of that idea. I was just going to make patterns. I was buying tons of Millie too, and it was like I saw Millie as like an opportunity to maybe have a side business going and make Millie and sell it, or buy Millie and cut it and polish it and sell it, and that's tons of work. And rule number one, I'll put this out there: don't cut your cane up. You should keep all your cane right in cane until you're ready to use it, because the worst thing you can do is have like hundreds of slices pre-saw cut laying around ready to be polished, and let months go by and not polish them because you got other shit going on. Like keep your Millie in cane until the day is due to do something with the Millie.
Yeah, that's good tip.
Not something I knew at first. I cut hundreds of dollars worth of Millie, which I still have, just laying around as saw cut, and it sucks because hydrofluoric acid will do the job to polish a lot of glass, which is really my only step at this point. There's a lot that goes into cold working. Millie opened the door for cold working for me. Millie itself gave me the opportunity to open up all these other doors. It was, and I saw someone the other day post something about glass, like, all I make is mini tubes and spoons. And some kid was like, if that's really all you make, then you're missing like 3/4 of making glass just by missing out on cane and Millie alone. Like, I was not going for Venus de Milo or the Mona Lisa or Mary, Virgin Mary on the rocks or whatever. You know what I mean? I was going for psychedelic pattern making based on kaleidoscope style imagery, so that I could have a subject matter to use, and at the same time I could figure out how color worked. I could figure out how things laid together. the tube making of Millie and doing things with the Millie didn't come into play for like 6 months, 8 months. Like
exactly. That's what I noticed.
I just pulled weird shit and sat around and looked at it, and I was like, maybe I can do something with this. If I did this, what if, and I didn't even do anything with it. I just asked myself, I'm like, well, if I do this, I wonder if this will happen. And then I would look at it, the block, and I'd be like, nah, that probably won't do that. And then I'd see something, someone would do something with a Millie, and I'd be like, oh, wait, maybe he did do what I just did. And then I would go try it, and it would kind of work. And it was just seeing, it wasn't even taking classes. It was like seeing like someone post something on Instagram, or someone in my studio make like a marble, and me be like, damn, how did he do that marble? And then I would try a couple different ways, and eventually it was like, oh yeah, you're like getting the Millie itself too hot. Like you need to heat up the clear more and kind of like pancake the Millie between it, and that like, so it was like, okay, now we're making like Millie's end shit. Like Millie is still not tubing yet. And it was like, what I was seeing take place was like glass restarting. It was like the whole machine had fucking, literally the whole machine was like spinning like a clock, and all of a sudden it literally spun on its axis to a completely new clock, and the clock was in some weird fucking font that is like some weird ancient font that I had no idea what I was even looking at. And that was the Millie thing. And for a year or two, I sat around making this weird pattern shit, looking at it, not knowing what to do with it. I owned a lap wheel and a saw, and I had some buddies who were fortunate enough to get employed by a company who is out here in Colorado that works with Millie a lot. So I got the chance to kind of see Millie coming out of the studio, cold worked in a way that was more usable than I was making the Millie and using it. So it was like I was able to see like, oh shit, I need to cold work my stuff a little more. I need to like spend a little more time getting my chip just the right size to do what I want to do with it. Then,
yeah, it's good having those references.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. It was like holy shit! Like, did that just come into the shop? Did I just see that come into the studio, like in a little tackle box, all to this specific grit? Already ready to go. And it was like that kind of pushed me into a spot where I was like, okay, this needs to be more refined. There's the refinement. The raw idea is the pattern, the kaleidoscope, the idea that this imagery can just constantly be changed. That is the raw idea. The refinement was the process of taking that raw idea and crisping the prep work so crisp that when it was in its final form, it looked so natural that people still saw the natural aspect of the Millie. They didn't even think to themselves that it had been worked. Like that is the beauty. That's the beauty right there of good, clean Millie work. Pattern making, tube making marbles, anything having to do with Millie is getting it so clean that the person viewing it is so taken back on a natural feeling that they're not even questioning the idea that was made by a machine, that they know that like a human put their heart and soul into that. And at the end of the day, truthfully, a machine did a good majority of the cleaning up and the processing and the refinement. So,
well, and that's why like Micro and Captain Crunk's work for a decade plus now has.
Micro won't put out shit. Micro won't put out seconds.
No, it's no, and
the amount of sells slices, like it's hard to get stuff from him now. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. But seeing those guys doing that stuff for so long and the refinement, like you're talking about, and the processes to where they are now, it's so fucking awesome to seeing it, and then seeing your stuff, and then like seeing these fully worked pieces with
on the same boat, don't you see a lot of the pattern making out there that's that Millie work that is not crisp? It's very blurry. It's got blurred edges.
Oh, it's hazed.
It's hazed.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, did you even ask yourself, was that acceptable, or did something fuck up there? Like you didn't even ask yourself that. You know what I mean? Like let's be real here. It you know what it took? It took me fucking shit up so far in the Millie process to learn how to tone it back one notch to just nail it. Like you have to go, so you can't just hit it and do it and make it look shitty and be like, yep, there it is, I did it. You have to hit it so shitty that you're like, wow, not only did I go beyond nailing it, but now I broke the damn thing. Like now I need to come back,
a great example, dude, is when you're tuning a guitar string. You drop it down low, and then you bring it up until you almost pop the string, and then you just go back just a smidge, and then you're in tune.
And a lot of people don't do that. People, especially I see it I don't know if it's because they don't know what they're looking at. I never did Millie because anybody else did Millie. I didn't do Millie because I even knew what I was doing. I did Millie because I was into trippy ass shit, and I knew that I could get that out of that if I worked hard enough. And I worked my ass off to the point that I could figure out how to manipulate that into tubing. I remember, man, it was like those classes continuously going on. Okay, so I remember about a week or so before I took this Kai Beck class. I don't know if you've had him on the show or not. He's
No, not yet. I need to.
Amazing Millie artist. Amazing. He's the work that he does with Millie post Millie being pulled is amazing. The process of tube making with Millie is something that anybody should be aware of. If you are advanced enough to implement that technique into your body of work, you should understand what's going on. I'm not someone to go out and tell you how to do that technique. I'm not someone to say so-and-so showed me how to do that technique. What I can tell you is that I worked hard and long up until literally the week before that class. Man, it was like 2 years. And then I took that class. And I remember coming into that class and saying to a buddy of mine, I bet this is how he does it. I know this is how he does it. A week ago, I was at my shop and I did this. I nailed it. And it was because of a Mike Rahman class that I had taken, God, a month prior to that I even had an appreciation for how to do what was going on in the way of the Millie tube building. And that class opened a big door for me. There was a Mike Rahman kind of class that took place at Tea Leaf, and it was like, no joke, it was Mike Rahman and kinda, and then literally 3 days later in a different city in Florida, it was JD and Hefe and Mike Rahman TA'd. And I saw so much shit go down that it was crazy. It was like just like everything else before that. It was perfect timing. I was doing the cold working. I was trying to implement Millie into my work. I was trying to figure out some very specific things. And those classes happened right when I was trying to figure them out. And I left those classes trying to make the Millie tubing. Took that Kai Beck class. And it was like day one, the first thing he did was that. And I remember asking him, I'm silly as hell, dude. I ask people, I'll take these classes. First thing I do is they're like, what do you want to learn? I'm like, big push bub. And they're like, okay, what else do you want to learn? I'm like, fume tech. Like, show me some fume tech, you know? And it's because I know these guys can do crazy seals. And I know these guys can do what they're good and known for because they've worked on it for 15 years. But I also know that in 1999, they were slaving away, making whatever, they learned in Kesey's backyard.
Yep.
Like Degenerate Art will say it, the fume shit, dude. They're making crazy, weird little fume things and just blasting off colors and stuff. I want to see that. And I always ask that Kai Beck class, first thing, they're like, dude, it's a Millie class. Kai Beck's like, anybody got any specific things they want to learn? I'm like, you got a fume marble you can pop off? And everyone looked at me like, dude, what are you doing? You're asking the Millie guy for a fume marble? You know, like that's how I am though. That's how you got to be. You got to come in there with some energy to want to learn shit beyond what they're known for, dude.
Plus you're putting these guys on the spot too, which I think is good because not everybody wants to do that. Everybody gets timid.
Yo, I'm more comfortable going up in a shop with my homies and going up to them while they're on the torch and asking them some real ass shit than I am sitting down with a homie and being like, yo, I got some real shit to talk to you about. Because I know when I catch them on the torch, number one, they ain't going to hold anything back. And number two, they're going to be busting their ass so hard on whatever they're doing that unfortunately they're not going to have the time to turn around and look at me and really like and say some shit back. They're just going to give me the answer and move on. So it's like, that's I'm like that with a lot of things. But anyways,
man.
I'll catch people off guard like that. Like dude's on the torch and I'm like, so like, how long have you been doing this? You know what I mean? And dude straight up's like, instead of being like, 15 years, he literally will say, how long have I been doing what? You know what I mean?
My answer is every time now, which I got from Charlie when people ask me how long I've been doing it for, I tell them what time I clocked in at.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's, you know what I'm saying? It's like people don't know how to take that a lot of times, but it's like, but then you ask them, show me a fume marble and dude's like, oh, what the fuck are you asking me? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So it's like, I've only ever gotten a fume marble once, I'm gonna be real. And it was obviously in a fume class, but that being said, Actually, you know what? No, I got a few marble another time, and I got a buddy asking that question, and he took a Whitney Harmon class, asked Whitney Harmon that, and Whitney Harmon popped off this crazy fume tech, and I heard all about it afterwards. So that
Fucking
was,
awesome.
but you got to have that energy, come into it like that, you know. Anyways, though, I took that Kai Bet class. This is back. We're getting off topic now. Back onto the Millie thing. I took that Kai Bet class, and man, it was like. I remember my buddy didn't even take the class. My buddy Hyphae Glass, Cody, he showed up like just a session shit before the class, and he's like, how do you think the class is going to go? And I'm like, oh, dude, I think I know exactly how it's going to go. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, dude, I've been working on this shit for 2 years. I took a class like 3 months ago from a guy, Mike Rahman, and he kind of did some shit that really opened a door for me on my own lap wheel, which was a blessing, dude. Anytime someone's like, you're in a class, Sheen's like, yo, anybody got a vacuum? Get your vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Dude's like,
oh yeah,
yo,
when Steve Sislov, dude, that class when Steve Sislov was looking for his spoon and he realized he forgot his spoon. I'm like, bro, I got a spoon. You want to borrow a spoon?
Yeah.
So I got my tool out, you know, and watched him use my spoon making his stuff.
Yeah, and it's like you might see something a little different. So that being said,
Yep.
you know, I saw some shit go down on my own lap wheel that I probably would have felt uncomfortable doing on my own lap wheel had the dude doing it not have been made in like a $10,000 or $20,000 piece, you know, at the time. So it's like where my head was at was holy shit, I need to start doing it like this. Started doing it like that, took that Kai Bet class, came out of that Kai Bet class, and it was just very obvious once again, JB Glass is complimenting where he's at on an educational standpoint by taking a class, implementing the technique into his work, and then moving along onto the next thing. When people didn't even get to see the fact that I had been working on that Millie stuff for so long, it was because I had never posted anything about it. It never came up. I never made it aware that I was working on this because it wasn't refined yet. And that's what I was trying to put into the world. So right then and there, I recognized that what Kai was really doing was those Wonka stones. That was like his thing. And the refinement aspect that was in those Wonka stones is what gave him his unique characteristic of art and where he was at. And what I can say is that it was like that class. And then I took a coil cha class and where I was like, okay, the shit needs to change. Like I'm only a student of glass right now. I actually saw Joe Peters post something. There was like something going on where people were discussing who's really pushing the drawing, who's really doing the drawing stuff to the limit, who's like putting everything into the drawing stuff, and who's just like doing like like who's getting like an impression on the glass and then drawing over it, or who's actually like laying real lines down and shit. Beyond all that, I saw Joe P post how drawing in particular had been something he had been working on for so many years, and how in general he was a student of glass. He would always consider himself that. And I knew that you always tell yourself, oh, I'll never know everything. I'll never know everything. I'll always be a student, obviously. But do you actually realize that? Do you live your life every day like that? Do you pull work out of the kiln like that? You know what I mean? Do you ask yourself at the end of the day when you go home, what could I have done better on that piece? Or do you go home saying, man, I'm the fucking shit? You know what I mean? I cannot tell you how rarely I have ever gone home and been like, damn, I'm the shit. I go home stoked on work as I put it in the kiln. When I come back the next day, I generally am picking it apart. And that, if anything, is the unrawness of me. That's my refinement. I'm constantly trying to refine little things here and there in my stuff. And it'll never be perfect. It shouldn't be. It should always constantly be willing to change and openness. But right then and there, when I took that Kai Bet class, I took this coil cha class. I saw coil really work like 25, maybe 40% of the time. The rest of the time, which blew my mind, it really changed my game up. He was drawing. He was doing a lot of character building with paint markers. And he was allowing the energy that he was giving off to come into fruition with those characters. And Cha, on the other side, was refining his characters. So I was seeing two different sides there again, the refinement thing again. So it was like, once again, here's where I'm at mentally, as I'm like, all right, 7 years now almost. This is 2000, I guess 5 years now. This is now 2016. started in 2011. This is now 2016. I'm sitting back one day in that Cha coil class, and I'm like, man, what is it? Why am I not figuring this out? Why do I continuously take these classes? In fact, this is now the second coil class I've taken. What am I going to get out of this? I took that Kybeck class. I brought my own information to the table, which I then received the same information in return on the technique that I had been practicing for years. Like what am I going to pull out of this other than just more technique that I can add into Salt? I took a Salt class. Salt will say this: it's your toolbox. At the end of the day, your brain, the capacity that you have there to store information, that is your toolbox. And the tools that you're bringing, man, if this is how you have to live your life, you're bringing that into you like constantly. All the information you're bringing in, they can be tools, they can be things that have absolutely no help whatsoever. I recognized that at that point, that coil Cha class, that who I was, JB Glass on Instagram, Jared JB. A lot of times I go by JB now. When I see who I was and who I am now for the past 6 or 7 years, I was only ever a student of glass. I was constantly bringing technique from those classes back home, implementing it into my work, taking another class, moving on, implementing that into my work. And I was never really building anything that was my own in a good way. Like, that was the best thing I could have done. Had I at some point early on been like, this is me, this is what I do, people would have never gotten to see me expand in my toolbox, which is, it's that Dali mindset. It's creating work up until the point that the general public that is viewing your work recognizes, and possibly the artists around you recognize the skill sets that you have, to the point that you can now do your own thing. And that's where it was like, dude, it was crazy. Like, I went to the Dali Museum. I visited Florida, went to the Dali Museum, came back, took this class with Kybeck, or I took the class with Kybeck same weekend. And then I took that coil Cha class like a couple weeks later. And it was like all of these things, dude. I was listening I listened to that same guided tour shit all the time from that damn Dali show, or from the Dali Museum. But I remember right then and there recognizing I need to start not necessarily drawing, because, dude, you should always draw. For 5 years, people are like, you ever draw? You ever draw? No, dude, I've never drawn shit. In fact, 3/4 of the work I make, never drawn a sketch for. I just made work that complemented where I was at on a technical aspect of glass. And people reviewed my work and purchased my work and supported me as an artist because they saw the energy and time and consistency that was going into that refinement. They weren't buying my work because I was this guy making this specific thing over and over again in different colors, and people were stoked on it and shit. And all of a sudden I got a card cap with the same thing on it, and I got a pendant that looks like it. People weren't buying my work for that. People were buying my work because I would do a little meet and greet at a wholesale drop at a smoke shop. They would show up. They would see a gang of mini tubes. The next 2 months later, I'd do another little wholesale drop and a meet and greet at a smoke shop in town. They'd show up. They'd see recyclers. The next week, it was like constantly changing. And at the end of the day, I was showing up to these events. I was showing up to things, and people were expecting me to claim those things. People were buying my work by the not the end of JB, but by the climax of where I was at as myself, portraying myself as a glass artist. I was selling myself, and it was hard work. It was wrong work, in my opinion, because at the end of the day, I want to show up and I want people to recognize me, not for my face or for the smile that I have, which I still carry, but for the energy that's in my work. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to show up. I don't want to show up and be in a bad mood because dude thinks I'm like I don't want to be something to someone that I'm really not, you know? And I don't want to give off an energy to someone that might not be what they expect. I want to give people what they expect, you know? And at the end of the day, it's because they know me, or they've been around my work enough to appreciate it, in a sense, to know that that's the kind of dude that is, you know, like Matt Robinson with the playfulness of his characters. That's the kind of dude he is. He's a great dude. He's a good going guy, positive energy. he's got nice shit to say about everyone. You know what I mean? It's like that's his inner.
Yeah.
He puts it into his work. The people that are incorporating old Venetian style into their work, they have an old soul. I bet you meet those people. They got a little bit of an old school characteristic about them that might be, Renaissance-y,
Right,
So
or a
it's
little
like,
wiser per se.
the wise man mindset. And then you look at their work and you're like, dude, yeah, duh. There it is, So it's like I had nothing. I was just another dude rocking cargo shorts and a grassroots hat and a Whoop Zip t-shirt and my GTT Mirage and a little toolbox. And I was going to and from these classes, picking up the information, coming back and being like, yeah, check out my new mini tube that now has this on it because I learned it from so and so, or check out what I can do now. So there was a time there, the milli work, if anything, now it's drawing for me right now, but specifically I told myself, I said, all right, if this is it, if this is my educational expanse in the pipe industry, and this is if only going to classes from pipe artists is going to give me this information, where am I at right now? What am I pulling from it? And where am I going with it? And what I feel like I really recognized was that the milli work, the cane building, was the climax. That was like, all right, dude, you got the down stems, you got the encalmos, you got the mini tubes, you can make a push bub the way you want, that you've been asking everybody for the past 4 years to give you a demo on. Like someone finally gave me the fucking push bub demo. Mike Rahman of all people, 4 years later gives me the push bub demo. So it's like,
Awesome.
it's like, and his push bub demo was a demo that Sheen gave him. And moving forward, it's just like, I recognized pattern making was going to be where I was going to say, all right, dude, this is the last thing you're going to learn. You're going to go learn how to make some milli, and then you're going to start implementing it into your work, and you're going to try your hardest. You're going to try your hardest to be genuinely unique with what you do. And then all of a sudden, the milli pattern making became very common. Everybody was doing it. And pattern making in general in tube form is now very common. And to see people do what I was doing with millis, what a lot of people do with millis, with just simple color, strips of color, that's very prominent right now. Like the technique of the tube building has now become the refinement for people, where I was only looking at the milli itself as the refinement. And then the tube building was like kind of like an addition onto that, which then maybe like something else would spur off that. I got stuck on the tube building, and I got stuck on the milli tube building. And all of a sudden it was like, wow, people are coming out with really advanced patterns and tubes, like not tubes like a functional piece, but like a section of tubing. Like other people are coming out with really advanced stuff that's obviously taking way less time than I am. You know what I mean? Like I'm obviously not playing this card right. Like, that you realize as an artist at some point, I can survive on this or I cannot survive on this. And if you are truly surviving as an artist, you don't bail on your dreams, but you step back from what you're doing and you question how you're approaching it, what you're doing with it. And is it really feeding me every day? Is it helping me survive every day in a manner that I can put in that first shift? Because a lot of times I was coming in on that milli work, and I would work both shifts doing milli work, and I would not get proto done. And then milli work would sell, it would not sell, it jumps back and forth. And it's like, at the end of the day, it shouldn't be about that. I want to make milli work because I think it's the climax of my educational thing, cane building, the drawing. I want to do that because of that. I don't want to do that because I have to survive off of it. So it's like, now it's like, now where do I go with milli? Now where do I go with milli? So it's like, I feel like at that point I almost accepted, all right, what I have on hand is what I have on hand. I'm going to put it into a gallery setting. I'm going to do what I can do with it. And we're going to see how it goes. If people recognize, this is the Dali mindset again. If people recognize in a gallery setting that this work is the climax of technique for where I have been on an educational background for the past 6 or 7 years, then they will obviously recognize that where I'm going now on this new body of work, or where I want to be in the future on a new body of work, is that unique characteristic that I can like makeup that's genuinely unique that they might not understand, but they understand that the skill set's there because they knew me for the Millie, they knew me for all the other shit, or because they came to that gallery show and saw that shit. So, there was like a weird time period there where I was doing the Millie and also that sculpted body of work, the lurker work that I'm doing now. And I know that's kind of where you want to get on topic at. Yeah,
it is. Because to me, it's the culmination of everything you've been doing for like the last 6-7 years.
100%, exactly where I'm at.
And what's fun is like it seems like everything for yourself's been very serendipitous in terms of like you're at a point, and I found that that's how it's been for myself as well. And when you have that experience in your life, it means you're on the right path. It means that your experiences that you're going through, whether it's positive or negative, or what you're supposed to be experiencing, because one thing leads to the next, and we constantly are growing as human beings, as glass artists, whatever the fuck it is we're doing.
Oh man, when you're sitting there like, oh shit, should I do this? I don't know if I should do this. And dude's like, dude, fucking do it. And then all of a sudden you do it, and then like the next day you wake up and you're like, oh my God, I'm so glad I fucking did that.
Yeah, or you're like, oh my God, I wish I wouldn't have done that.
If that happens, and that's never happened to me. God bless, dude. Yeah. That has never happened to me. I have 100%, and I'm going to be real with you. I think it's because I 100% am so not paranoid, but like I'm like, I got my shit together, dude, constantly. Like I from the time I was 18, I got kicked out of my house for getting a tattoo. I got kicked out of my mom's house for getting a tattoo when I was 18, and I lived in a kitchen and on a couch, and my manager at the retail store's studio apartment, and I had friends buying me meals on their food stamps that they had. Like I clearly recognized then at 17, 18, when I was living on my own and still trying to get my shit together and go to school and graduate high school and shit, I was in there that, it was a great thing my parents did for me. My mom's awesome. It was probably the best thing she ever did for me. But that being said, I recognized then and there that if it's going to happen, it's going to happen the way it should. And it's going to be because I worked my ass off to make that shit happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So, it's really
Yeah, man. So, I guess, what was it? 2 years now you had your show at Zen?
I did that. So, yeah, the show at Zen happened in 2017, August 2017, which is interesting, August 2017. So it was roughly 6 years post starting of Blowing Glass. And previous to Blowing Glass, my background was 100% digital artwork. And that's what kind of, I think, gave me the play into where I'm at now, photography-wise and digital work-wise. I really didn't know much about glass coming into it. So it's interesting to see that, yeah, six years later in August, I'm doing or 5 years later in August, I'm doing a show kind of complementing that time period of education.
Yeah. And what I thought was pretty fucking amazing from my perspective, and I'm sure from other people that didn't know what the hell was going on, was that there was this class that was booked at Zen for two artists.
Yeah. Explain it. You can explain it. You can go into it.
Yeah. So I'm seeing that. So Zen's they hold classes. Typically, you have two artists or one artist and assistant. So you have JB and Lurker teaching this class together. For like the last 6 months or so before this class had been taught, I was seeing on Instagram this Lurker account and seeing this cool stuff going on. See, you're collabing with them, the whole 9 yards. And I'm like, damn, this is fucking cool. This, who is this Lurker kid? Some new upcoming kid out in Colorado that my brother's working with. It's pretty badass. And you had never mentioned anything about him before or what have you. So we talked about coming to see your opening because usually the artists that have.
I was pushing your ass, dude. I was pushing you. I was like, you better be there. You better be there.
And I was gonna make sure I was there. But what Zen does is the artists that teach the classes also have a gallery show for sale stuff and to kind of show off the work. And then they also have the piece or two or three or whatever was made in the classes available as well in the gallery. So you had this gallery show with Lurker in the backside of the studio in the gallery space. So we get up there and we're fucking, I have my daughter with me and we're seeing all the glass, and the gallery's usually split up with artists on one. It's like a symmetrical gallery. So artists on one side, artists on the left side, right side. You finally come in, we're kind of bullshitting a little bit, and you're like, hey, what do you think about my work? And I didn't go around and see Lurker's stuff. I just looked at your stuff and all the Millie work, and I kind of glanced at the other stuff from a distance. Josh comes walking in. Rachel's taking our pictures and shit because we hadn't seen each other in a while. It's also your first opening, blah, blah, blah. It was an amazing experience. But you're sitting there telling me, like, hey, what do you think about all my work? And you're like circling in your hand to the entire gallery space. So I'm like, yeah, man, I saw your stuff over here. It's fucking amazing. And I'm digging the Millie stuff. I'm telling you how much I like the art of what you're doing. And you're like, no, dude, this is all my work. And I'm like, yeah, man, I fucking saw it, And you're like, no, dude, this is all my work. And it took me a second, and like literally was in complete awe that I had no fucking idea that you were lurker this entire time.
Dude, I almost
that
cried
there wasn't
right then
just
and there. I worked my ass off to that. And dude, for 6-7 years, I worked my ass off to have that moment happen. Not necessarily for you and me, but for that moment to happen and the way that you accepted it. Like, you recognized that someone was up and coming and branding themselves the right way, and that I was collabing with them as if it was like this guy actually had his shit together, and I was kind of just like his like soft spoken play, you know, or something like
yeah.
his
Completely.
shit looked better. But it was just me the whole fucking time.
Yeah, and I had no fucking clue. Everybody else did. And Josh is over in the corner like, what, you didn't know? Like he knew the whole time I didn't know, motherfucker.
Oh, you don't yeah, like suggestive with his hands. Oh, you didn't know, you didn't know.
Yeah, exactly. It was so funny, dude. I mean, I was literally in shock for like 3 days after that whole situation. Like my brain still just couldn't process that this had just happened, you know? But it was amazing to see it. And it was amazing to see that you had found your voice in your work through all this stuff that you had been building up for all these years and learning all this. Like you're saying, you're a student. We're always going to be a student, but now you have this brand that you've created. But it's also something that you can, you know, whether you kind of explain it to me was that this, you know, the milli work that you're doing, the shapes and stuff, that's your art. The other stuff is your high-end production type of stuff. And, you know, like a Blitzkrieg, a fucking balloon dog kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you're allowing yourself to be creative and have fun and not be so fucking anal retentive, OCD,
which is what I had,
stressed out.
That's what I had done for 6 years.
Yeah, you're like in this ball of stress,
Yes,
and all of a sudden you're like blew a fucking load, dude, and like unleash this amazing line of work from a different perspective of this completely different persona of who you actually are as a person. But a lot of people don't know that.